Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The police were looking for an elderly man who had been reported missing by his friend on the evening of April 28 in the woodland region of Hibbs Park, located at 59th Street and Kensington Avenue in Kansas City, Missouri. However, rather than locating the man, they made the terrible discovery of a female toddler's severed head in the woods, about 200 yards from where her severed body was recovered on May 1, 2001. The child's missing head was discovered wrapped in a plastic bag. No one had reported the youngster missing, and the head was completely decayed. The cops named her Precious Doe because they didn't know who she was. There were many unresolved questions surrounding this discovery. Who was this kid? What was the reason behind the horrifying manner of her murder? So let's go straight to the riddle without any more ado. Large plains, undulating hills, and scenic splendor are the hallmarks of Kansas City, Missouri. Numerous cultural attractions, such as museums and art galleries, are abundant in Kansas. With more than 20 authorized wildflower trails spread throughout the state's rural and urban areas, it is aptly known as the Sunflower State. Kansas City, which has a population of nearly 500,000, is among the most violently crime-ridden cities in the United States, with 57 violent crimes per 10 citizens. And our story starts in this city. In order to pick up Erica for a family reunion, Michelle and Harold returned to Betty's house on April 4, 2001. Because she loved the little girl so much, and because Easter was quickly approaching, Betty was hesitant to let her go. She also made arrangements for Erica to spend the Easter break with her. However, because Michelle was the biological mother, Betty was powerless. Betty packed up Erica's belongings, including the beautiful gowns she had purchased for her Easter outfits and her favorite doll. Unaware that it would be her final encounter with Erica, she said goodbye. They both agreed to bring the youngest of their children to Kansas City, Missouri, most likely because Carol had children before he met Michelle. Carol abducted Markeisha Johnson, his 6-month-old child, for a number of reasons, including the fact that Harold's cousin LaWanda Driscoll owned the apartment in Kansas and that Michelle already had her other 4 children elsewhere. They chose not to bring all of their children with them to Kansas City. After a few weeks, Harold's cousin, LaWanda Driscoll, quickly became aware that Erica was no longer with her. Michelle informed LaWanda that Betty Brown had traveled from Oklahoma to pick up Erica when she inquired about her location. An unidentified man called the police on the evening of April 28, 2001, claiming that he had been attempting to contact his friend for some time but had been unsuccessful. The cops complied with his request for assistance in performing a welfare check on his companion. They had to explore the forested area close to Hibbs Park, which is located at 59th Street and Kensington Avenue in Kansas City, Missouri, as they were unable to locate the man at his home. The police received a call informing them that the individual they were hunting for had been located after some time of searching, but just as they were ready to depart, they came upon a horrifying scene. A toddler's severed head. The remains was quickly identified by the authorities as belonging to a female toddler. The cops were dubious about the discovery right away because the deceased was discovered naked. In addition to wondering why no one had reported the disappearance of a child her age in the region, they also questioned why a toddler's death would be found in the woods. The absence of the head left the investigators at a loss. The probe would never move forward. They were only able to ascertain the child's age and sex. They discovered that the deceased body belonged to a black woman who was between the ages of 3 and 6. They also discovered that the woman had suffered maltreatment prior to her murder. About 200 yards from the location of the child's body, on May 1, 2001, 3 days after it was discovered, a volunteer searcher recovered the child's head wrapped in a plastic bag. An ashtray that the police thought was the murder weapon was found next to the body. Despite finding the head, the authorities were unable to identify the body's owner because it had completely decayed. Because of the victim's age and the gruesomeness of the murder, it quickly attracted national attention. The investigators kept looking in the hopes that the child's parent or guardian would come forward to collect her remains, but nobody did. The victim was given the nickname Precious Doe when it was impossible to identify them. Before long, a large number of people offered their time to help publicize Precious Doe by distributing flyers, radio, television, and newspapers. They even went door to door to ask questions that would lead to the victim's identity. The case was frequently highlighted on cold case files and America's Most Wanted in an effort to find the young child. However, despite everything, no one claimed the infant and no witnesses came forward. The public contributed funds for Precious Doe's funeral, which took place at Hibbs Park, close to the location where her body was discovered, in December 2001. Hundreds of individuals attended, demonstrating the large turnout of local citizens. Even though the case received a lot of publicity, nobody knew who Precious Doe was. When Precious Doe's body was dug up by the police in 2002 for an autopsy, the findings revealed that she had been severely beaten with an ashtray and mistreated prior to her murder. Nothing was discovered when police checked the ashtray for DNA and fingerprints. Researchers examined the resemblance of Precious Doe's skull in July 2003 and also fashioned busts that suggested her possible appearance. The case was so well known that the police were often getting tips, sometimes from people nearby and sometimes from far away. At one point, Jamaica called the police about the matter, but they discovered that it had nothing to do with who Precious Doe was. The people soon lost hope, since the police were preoccupied with other cases. However, Alonzo Washington, a strong advocate for Precious Doe's cause, never gave up on finding the truth. Every year, Alonzo placed advertisements about the case in a local newspaper. Because the victim was a Black American, Alonzo considered placing the advertisement in an African American newspaper for Precious Doe's 4th-year commemoration in April 2005. Additionally, he produced T-shirts using the bust image of Precious Doe, which proved to be the crucial breakthrough in the case. Thurman McIntosh, later identified as Harold Johnson's father, called Alonzo on April 30, 2005, and claimed to be well-versed in the Precious Doe case. Alonzo heard Thurman, who was 81, say that Precious Doe was actually Erica Green. Additionally, he asserted that Erica Green was murdered by Harold Johnson, his son. Thurman was asked by Alonzo why he had kept the information secret since 2001 and was only disclosing it in 2005. Every time Thurman called the police to tip them about the crime, he said, "They fired him." Alonzo then insisted that Thurman provide him a photo of Erica and a lock of Michelle's hair. As soon as Thurman sent Alonzo a hair sample, he forwarded it to Detective David Bernard, the lead detective in the Precious Doe investigation. When Thurman was taken in for interrogation on May 4, 2005, he explained to the detectives why he was certain his son was responsible. After Thurman stopped seeing Erica, he asked Harold and Michelle where she was. In his capacity as an activist, he learned of other citizens who believed that the police were not paying attention to their issues. They both replied that she was in Oklahoma with Betty. Thurman claimed that he had a sudden suspicion that Precious Doe was Erica Green, as the couple and Markeisha were moving back to Oklahoma. Harold said it was an error when Thurman confronted him and admitted that he knew he killed Erica. After learning the truth, Thurman declared his desire to share Precious Doe's fate with the world before his passing. The hair was exactly like Precious Doe's, even though the photo Thurman sent was for one of Erica's relatives. Precious Doe was finally pronounced as Erica Green by the authorities. Erica Michelle Marie Green is the name of the young child we have known for 4 years as Precious Doe. On May 15, 1997, Erica Green was born in McLeod, Oklahoma, in the United States. She was the youngest of 5 children born to her father Larry Green and mother Michelle Johnson. Michelle was sentenced to 2 years in the custody of the Oklahoma Department of Corrections after being found guilty of larceny of products from a merchant when she was 8 months pregnant with Erica. However, due to her pregnancy, she was placed in the Mabel Bassett Correctional Center. Michelle went into labor after just 1 month of her sentence. She gave birth to Erica Green at the OU Medical Center in Oklahoma City after being transported there. She was asked to get in touch with a guardian who could help her hold her child until she was released because she was unable to care for Erica. In order to find a guardian for their child, Michelle reached out to Larry Green, Erica's father. Then Larry would give a call to Betty Brown, a friend of Larry's mother who was in her late 60s. When Betty arrived at the prison, she was requested to complete a series of tasks in order to be granted custody of Erica. To determine if Betty was qualified to receive care of the kid, the Correctional Facility Authority did not perform a background investigation. She just produced a Sam's Club card and her driver's license. A form was given to her to sign. Following this, on May 16, 1997, Custody of Erica Green was awarded to Betty. Betty referred to Erica as one of the most self-reliant kids she had ever encountered, and she loved and cared for her as if she were her own child. She added that Erica was a sweet girl who never stopped smiling and that everyone adored her whenever she brought her to church. On October 23, 1997, Michelle was then freed on probation. Since Michelle only seldom came to see Betty Brown to see how her child was doing, Betty claims that Michelle was not very engaged in caring for Erica. When Erica was 3 years old in 2000, Michelle had already found a new partner, Harold Johnson, whom she married that same year. Harold Johnson soon had Michelle living with him in Oklahoma. After verifying that the body was that of Erica, the police searched for her mother, Michelle, and her companion, Harold. Harold and Michelle were both in the Muskegon County Jail in Oklahoma after being detained on certain warrants. The police were on the spot. They went straight to the facility to interrogate Harold Johnson and Michelle. When the authorities showed Michelle Erica's photo during the interrogation, Michelle recognized her daughter and put a note on the reverse. She agreed to inform the police how the murder occurred after writing, "Mama is sorry. You are always in my heart and soul. Love you always, little E." Michelle claims that Harold quickly became intoxicated and high on PCP when the family got home at around 8 p.m. on the evening of April 2001. In the same room as Harold, Michelle told Erica to go to bed while she went to the restroom. Harold had started complaining that Erica was horrible because she wouldn't go to bed before she even got out of the shower. Harold got upset after telling Erica to go to bed 5 or 6 times. Erica had left her bed once more by the time Michelle emerged from the restroom. Then she told Erica to return to her bed, but she didn't move. Harold kicked Erica till she passed out at that moment. According to Michelle, she hurried to get Erica and put her in a cold bathtub, but she refused to wake up. Michelle realized then that something significant had occurred. About 15 minutes later, Michelle carried Erica to the restroom and then to the floor, but she was still unconscious and not responding. Since they still had outstanding warrants, Michelle and Harold opted not to seek medical attention for Erica, even though they knew she needed it at that point. Despite knowing that Erica could die, Michelle decided not to call an ambulance because she didn't want to end up in jail. Erica remained unconscious for 10 to 14 hours, and by the next morning, she had passed away. Harold and Michelle concealed Erica's body in a baby stroller after she passed away. Michelle claims that they decided to dispose of the body because they were both afraid and unsure of what to do. After waiting until nightfall to ensure that no one would notice, they both carried Erica's body outside through the house's window and headed directly for the woods. Harold considered using edge clippers to remove the head and disfiguring it to make identification more difficult, since he worried that leaving the body in its current state may eventually lead the police to their house. Michelle felt that was a bad idea, but they wrapped the head in plastic bags and threw it in a dumpster at a local church. Because the smell may alert the church owners, she instructed Harold to remove the head. Harold followed his wife's advice and tossed the head into Hibbs Park's forested area. Harold then left Erica's body in the woods after removing her clothing and giving it to Michelle. They went back home and went into their room the same way they had left. LaWanda Driscoll would soon realize that Erica was not there, but no one saw what they did. Michelle pretended that she was lying in the room because she was ill when she was questioned where she was. Michelle told the police what had happened and then requested that they take her to meet Harold. She encouraged Harold to confess to their misdeeds, telling him that she had already done so. Harold initially became agitated and pleaded with Michelle to retract her testimony, but Michelle had already decided to testify against Harold in court. Later, Harold consented to provide an oral statement in which he explained how he killed Erica and took off her head. "I'm so sorry that this happened, and I hope that you forgive me for what I have done, and I will always love you with my heart and my soul. I will always miss you. Harold Johnson," is written on the note he wrote behind Erica's photo, which he took while being questioned. Many people who worked tirelessly to bring Erica justice found closure in the charging of the offenders in this case. Unfortunately, Erica's father, Larry Green, was incarcerated when the people decided to give her a dignified funeral in August 2005 under her real identity. According to Kansas City Councilman Alvin Brooks, he and other individuals attempted but were unable to obtain authorization from Larry Green to attend his daughter's funeral. Erica would be happy wherever she is because of the vast number of people that helped secure justice for her, even though her family was not there at her funeral. LaWanda Driscoll also described her knowledge of the case. She claimed that Carol had been abusing Erica in the days leading up to her passing. LaWanda claimed that Erica's scream from the bedroom was the last time she heard from her. LaWanda claims that because Erica was not accustomed to living with her mother and stepfather, she sobbed a lot, and Harold punished her more severely for her emotions. She added that Harold would beat Erica for anything, no matter how insignificant. A week or two later, LaWanda heard Harold say to Michelle, "You better go take care of your daughter or I'm going to do something bad." She now thinks the big bang she heard coming from the bedroom was the kick that knocked Erica out. According to LaWanda, Michelle assisted in distributing flyers to individuals and even shed tears during the girls' vigil, while everyone searched for Precious Doe's identification. LaWanda claims that if someone had a question about Erica, Michelle had an answer ready. Michelle and Harold were charged on May 5, 2005, with Erica Green's murder, abandoning a corpse, tampering with physical evidence, and endangering the welfare of a child. Before being put on trial, Michelle entered a guilty plea to second-degree murder and other associated offenses in 2007 and was given a 25-year jail sentence. Harold began saying things that would implicate Michelle as soon as he realized she would testify against him. According to him, Michelle had no interest in Erica at all. According to him, Michelle would occasionally leave Erica alone so she could go do narcotics. However, the investigators already knew everything he stated. It was not until 2008 that Harold was put on trial. The neurologist testified that Erica might have survived if she had received medical assistance in the hours prior to her death, even though her autopsy described her cause of death as a closed head injury, which happens when the head strikes an object. However, this would not have been equivalent to first-degree murder. Following many days of deliberation, the jury convicted Harold of first-degree murder, child abuse, and endangering the welfare of a child. Harold received a life sentence without the possibility of release. In November 2008, Harold filed an appeal, continuing to maintain that he is not the kind of person the state claimed he was. The state attorney and the defense lawyer exchanged arguments, with Harold's team arguing that the murder was not planned, but according to the state, Erica's murder was planned. Michelle revealed in her confession that she instructed Harold to give his orders to Markeisha solely and not to order Erica around the night of Erica's murder. According to the state, Harold was irritated by Michelle's statement and considered killing Erica at that same moment. Additionally, the autopsy reveals that Erica was kicked several times, demonstrating Harold's deliberate continuation of the child's kicking, even though he was aware that she may die. Harold's appeal of the verdict, according to John Torrance, demonstrated no remorse because the murder was not premeditated. Harold's appeal was denied by the judge, who described him as a textbook sociopath who refuses to accept responsibility for his acts. Many individuals found relief at this sentencing, even if the disclosure of Erica's identity provided closure to those who were rooting for her. Everyone in attendance at Erica's sentencing was happy with Harold's verdict, but others wanted Michelle to receive the same punishment. Erica's real father, Larry Green, also sued the Oklahoma D.C., raising concerns about the procedure used to decide custody of children born to incarcerated moms. However, in order to guarantee that infants delivered to prisoners will be transferred to the Department of Human Services for appropriate care, the Department of Corrections and the Department of Human Services agreed to implement new protocols. The tragedy of Erica Green serves as a reminder that evil exists inside human nature. Even though parents are known to love and protect their children, it is horrifying and heartbreaking to learn that some parents would put their own needs before of their children. Many individuals with knowledge of Erica's situation have opinions regarding the sentence. Do you also believe that, as the biological mother, Michelle ought to have received a harsher penalty? And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Suzanne Pilley's mysterious disappearance sent shockwaves through her community, causing serious concerns among her loved ones. Suzanne, a 38-year-old bookkeeper, was scheduled to start work at 9 a.m. that fateful Tuesday morning at Infrastructure Management on Thistle Street, Edinburgh, Scotland. However, as the morning progressed and Suzanne failed to appear at her desk, her coworkers became increasingly concerned. It was completely out of character for her to arrive late or leave work without notice. Concerned about her unexplained absence, Suzanne's coworkers decided to contact her parents, Robert and Sylvia Pilley. Suzanne had last communicated with her parents at 8:30 a.m. when she texted them to say she was on her way to work. Given this text message, her parents became very concerned about her well-being when she did not arrive at work as expected. They suspected that something unusual had happened during her commute because they hadn't heard from her since the initial message. Suzanne's parents, who were growing increasingly concerned, immediately reported her disappearance to local police that afternoon. In the days that followed, law enforcement launched an investigation, making public requests for information and interviewing people who knew Suzanne. As the investigation progressed, several unsettling facts emerged. Suzanne's bank cards and phone had shown no activity since her disappearance. She hadn't used her bus pass and hadn't communicated with any of her friends or family members. Furthermore, Suzanne's family believed she would not have left without informing anyone because she had responsibilities at home, such as caring for her pets. Suzanne's father, Robert, expressed the profound confusion and distress that surrounded their family during this difficult time. He compared her disappearance to a perplexing enigma, claiming that it felt as if she had vanished into thin air, leaving behind a void beyond explanation. Suzanne's sudden disappearance remained a perplexing and deeply troubling mystery, with her loved ones, law enforcement, and the community as a whole searching for answers. The investigation into Suzanne Pilley's mysterious disappearance began to reveal new details as police meticulously reviewed CCTV footage from the area. The footage revealed a timeline of Suzanne's movements on the day she vanished, shed light on the events that led up to her disappearance. Suzanne followed her routine on the morning of her disappearance, leaving her apartment on Whitton Road at 8 a.m. to begin her day as usual. About 20 minutes later, she boarded a number 2 bus at Stevenson Drive and continued on her regular route. She then transferred to the number 4 bus on Dalry Road, opposite the Caledonian Terrace. Suzanne disembarked from the number 4 bus on Princess Street directly outside the Generous Department Store at 8:48 a.m. She began her workday with a routine stop at a Sainsbury's convenience store, as she did most mornings. Surveillance cameras captured Suzanne's presence at the Sainsbury's store at 8:51 a.m. After finishing her errands, she headed to her workplace, which is Infrastructure Management on Thistle Street. Suzanne's last known footage was captured by a CCTV camera near the building at the corner, only 50 meters from her office front door. At this point, she appeared to vanish from sight, leaving authorities with a perplexing mystery to solve. The investigation revealed one potentially significant detail. At 8:55 a.m., a black cab stopped in the area where Suzanne was last seen. Although law enforcement did not believe the cab driver was directly involved in Suzanne's disappearance, they did issue an appeal to the driver to come forward and help with their ongoing investigation. This development raised questions about whether the cab driver witnessed anything unusual or had information that could help solve the mystery of Suzanne Pilley's disappearance. As the investigation into Suzanne Pilley's disappearance progressed, law enforcement began to look into her personal life in an attempt to better understand the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. Their investigations led them to what appeared to be a complex love triangle, which shed light on a possible motive for the crime. Suzanne, a single woman, had recently been in a romantic relationship with a coworker, David Gilroy. However, the relationship ended in December 2009. David, who was married and had his own family, had decided to return to his wife and children in an attempt to reconcile with them. He told the police that Suzanne had been dating other men since their breakup, implying that their romantic relationship had ended amicably. Several weeks after Suzanne's mysterious disappearance, David Gilroy reported a break-in to police. He claimed that someone broke into his home while he was sleeping, stealing both his mobile phone and laptop. According to David, his wife discovered the broken back door when she woke up, despite the fact that they had heard very little noise during the intrusion. When asked if he thought the break was connected to Suzanne's disappearance, David responded with uncertainty, saying, "I don't know." The investigation took a darker and more ominous turn when authorities began looking for the driver of a silver car that had apparently stopped in a remote forest area. They expressed their interest in the vehicle movements on the afternoon and evening of May 5, the day after Suzanne's last sighting. The police were especially interested in anyone who saw the car between 1 p.m. and 3:30 p.m., as well as around 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. In a significant development, authorities publicly announced the shift from a missing person case to a murder investigation. They revealed that they believe Suzanne was murdered and that her body was either disposed of or concealed about 90 miles from her last known location. The search was expanded to cover approximately 400 square miles of rural Gill and Butte. The investigation centered primarily on the Rest, Be Thankful, and Argo Forest regions. Despite extensive searches, no trace of Suzanne was found at this time. As the investigation progressed, police focused their search on a 5-square-mile area. They suspected Suzanne's remains could be hidden in Glen Crow, Argill, and Butte. They continued their determined efforts to solve the mystery of her disappearance. Despite the absence of Suzanne's body, the authorities believed they had gathered sufficient evidence to charge David Gilroy with her murder. The investigation into this enigmatic case was meticulous and painstaking. Law enforcement is working tirelessly to bring justice. They interviewed nearly 1,500 potential witnesses and meticulously documented 1164 statements. The investigators diligently gathered 25 pieces of evidence, which included documents and various objects. Furthermore, they examined CCTV footage from 250 different locations and conducted thorough searches in 30 different areas throughout our mission. In court, the prosecution stood firm, presenting a compelling case. Their arguments revolved around the notion that, despite the absence of Suzanne's body, a wealth of evidence pointed to her being the victim of a heinous crime, with David as the primary suspect. The prosecution revealed the intricate tapestry of Suzanne and David's relationship, which began at work. However, their turbulent love story had taken a dark turn when Suzanne chose to end the relationship shortly before her mysterious disappearance, a decision attributed to her newfound involvement with another person. During the trial, Suzanne's mother, Sylvia, testified, providing a moving glimpse into her daughter's life. Sylvia recounted Suzanne's marriage in 2004, followed by a divorce. Suzanne had taken a significant step toward independence by purchasing her own Edinburgh apartment, which became David's residence in 2009. Sylvia made it clear that he had left his wife and was seeking a divorce. Suzanne did not cause the breakup. The courtroom remained wrapped as the prosecution continued to unravel the complex narrative. David's obsession with Suzanne became a central theme in their case. The prosecution revealed that David sent an astounding 400 text messages in the month leading up to Suzanne's disappearance, indicating that he was unwilling to accept the end of their relationship. Phone records provide a vivid picture of David's persistent attempts to communicate with Suzanne. In the days leading up to her disappearance, he sent her over 50 texts per day. His final communication with Suzanne was on May 3, the day before she went missing, and consisted of 15 text messages and 1 voicemail. The prosecution's case took an unsettling turn when it painted a vivid and sinister picture of what happened on May 4. They claimed Suzanne had followed her usual daily routine, going to work as she had done countless times before. In a chilling scenario, the prosecution claimed that David waited for Suzanne to arrive at the office building and strangled her almost immediately, possibly luring her into the basement. According to their version of events, he then hid Suzanne's lifeless body in the basement of the office building, adding to the mystery surrounding her disappearance. David then went back home to retrieve his silver Vauxhall Vectra. That would quickly become an important piece of the puzzle in this haunting case. The prosecution claimed that Suzanne's lifeless remains were hidden in the car's trunk, away from prying eyes. As the courtroom listened intently, the prosecution painted a disturbing picture of David's immediate actions following the alleged crime. He bought air fresheners, most likely in an attempt to mask any odors associated with his unpleasant activities. Furthermore, he made numerous visits to the basement and garage areas of the infrastructure management offices, despite having no legitimate reason to be there. Following these ominous activities, David went about his day seemingly unaffected, attending a school presentation with his wife and sharing a meal at Victoria and Leith Walk. while immersed in the gripping courtroom drama surrounding Suzanne's disappearance and presumed murder. New details emerged that sent chills down the spines of everyone who followed the case. The night of May 4 was pivotal in the prosecution's narrative. David Gilroy had ostensibly made an appointment to visit a school the next day, May 5, in Logelfed, Argyll and Butte. The school in question was a client of his employer, but there appeared to be no legitimate reason for his attendance on that particular day. His interaction with a school cleaner who provided him with beanbags and cable ties added to his suspicions. This seemingly insignificant event would quickly become the focus of the investigation. The prosecution's case gained traction as they meticulously recreated David's journey to Argyll. They examined CCTV footage and his mobile phone records, revealing several-hour gaps on both legs of his journey from Lochsgilfhead to Inverarray. The journey took an incredible 2 hours longer each way than it should have. The prosecution claimed that the discrepancy concealed a sinister secret. Suzanne's body was hidden somewhere in that area. David was intimately familiar with this region. I've previously gone on walking holidays there with Suzanne. When investigators examined David's car, they made chilling discoveries. Vegetative matter was discovered on the vehicle, and 3 fractured coil springs suggested that it had been driven off-road. Things become even more complicated. The court learned that David had turned off his phone at some point during his journey, which added to the evidence against him. The court heard that cadaver dogs trained to detect the scent of human remains showed interest in both David's Vauxhall Vectra boot and specific areas of the office building's basement. As the trial progressed, the prosecution introduced a disturbing physical aspect to their case. When David went to the police station on May 6 to give a statement, authorities discovered alarming evidence. David had scratches on his hands, a cut on his forehead, bruises on his chest, and more scratches on his wrists and forearms. The prosecution claimed that David used makeup to conceal his injuries while speaking with the police, which raised additional suspicions. Gail Hawkins, Suzanne's N's friend, took the stand and made a shocking revelation. Suzanne had confided in her, concerned that David had hacked into her email account and gained unauthorized access to her emails. The prosecution claimed that David had accessed her emails between August 24, 2009 and April 30, 2010. The court also discovered that he had access to her account on an online dating site. Helen Liddell, a financial administrator at Infrastructure Management, testified that she discovered emails between David and Suzanne that clearly showed they were having an affair or relationship. This revelation surprised her because she was unaware of their relationship. The jury was shown CCTV footage of Suzanne and David just 2 days before she disappeared. On May 2, the two were seen shopping together at a convenience store. This contrasts sharply with David's claim to the police that their relationship ended in December 2009. Police efforts to find Suzanne's remains took a chilling turn when they narrowed the search area to only 5 square miles, based on David's phone records. These records showed that his phone had pinged off phone masts in the remote Glen Crow area on May 5, the day Suzanne went missing. Glen Crow, located in the Kerry Alps on the Cowell Peninsula in Argyll and Butte, boasted rugged mountains and a landscape riddled with formidable obstacles, including boulders, making the search for evidence particularly difficult. The defense responded with a concise case, claiming that there was insufficient evidence against their client and that the prosecution's case was based solely on circumstantial evidence. Suzanne's body had not been found, forcing the prosecution to speculate on her fate and cause of death. There were no witnesses to the alleged crime, no confession, and no DNA or blood evidence to connect David to the crime. The prosecution presented only circumstantial evidence, which left room for doubt. David declined to testify, but the defense summoned some of his co-workers to give testimony. They stated that nothing out of the ordinary occurred at the office on May 4. After 2.5 days of deliberation, the jury reached a split decision. The court accepted a majority verdict, and David was convicted of murder. He received a life sentence and was required to serve at least 18 years. David Gilroy maintains his innocence. On April 27, 2012, he filed notice of intent to appeal his conviction. However, on December 2012, the Court of Criminal Appeal in Edinburgh dismissed the appeal. In June 2017, the Scottish Criminal Cases Review Commission concluded its investigation of the case. Share your opinion with us in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Overconfidence, gullibility, and naivete are harmful qualities that can sometimes result in death. However, there are times when we all want to believe in miracles and that childhood fantasies can still come true. When something you've wanted is so close that you can practically touch it, self-preservation, caution, and common sense can all take a backseat. This vulnerability is precisely what crooks take advantage of. The cruelty and inhumanity of the 2005 case of Elodie Morel, a young French woman, stunned the nation. The icy disregard of common people who were aware of her detention and imminent death, but chose to remain silent in order to make a quick profit, only served to heighten the horror. This story illustrates why not all dreams come true, and why you shouldn't blindly believe someone who claims to be able to bring a fairy tale to life. Elodie Morel was who? On February 18, 1976, Elodie Morel was born in Marseille. She was beautiful, even heavenly, from an early age. Elodie flowered into a breathtaking beauty as she grew older, and many people thought she would look great on TV or the cover of high-end magazines. She developed an obsession with modeling as a teenager, but because she hailed from a lowly background, no one took her goal seriously. Elodie often submitted her pictures to different modeling agencies in the 1990s, but she never received a response. She attended college after high school, married Sylvain, a classmate, at age 22, and had a son by the time she was 25. She appeared to have permanently given up on her goal of becoming a model. Elodie was employed as a sales clerk at a hip clothes store in Marseille's downtown by 2005. She saw the adoring or jealous glances directed at her and was often complimented. She could easily pass for someone in her early 20s, aged 29, because to her flawless figure and lovely facial features. Elodie never completely gave up on her desire of being a model, but she stopped discussing it because she believed her time had come. However, she submitted an online application in April 2005, included her finest images, and stated that she was still interested in being a model. It didn't take long to respond, but the fashion photographer's alluring offer ended up being an invitation to a protracted, painful death, a snare for the credulous. Elodie got a flattering and alluring offer about 2 weeks after she put up her profile online. She might be the new face of the well-known English luxury vehicle manufacturer, Rolls-Royce. In order to complete the contract, she had to meet with the photographer and conduct a test shoot. The contract offered a payout of €1,000 per day for a picture session. The meeting was scheduled to take place at a pub in Aigues-Mortes on May 2. Excited, Elodie told her husband the news, and he didn't protest despite his skepticism. The young mother left her son with her parents early that morning, got into her car, and drove to the prearranged spot. She had already reserved a hotel room for her 3-day stay in Aigues-Mortes. Sylvain wished Elodie well and urged her to call as soon as she could. When she called her husband that evening to let him know she was apprehensive and on her way to the meeting, it would be his final conversation with his wife. On the last meeting, Elodie showed up at the pub as scheduled and waited to meet the female photographer she had allegedly been corresponding with via email at a table on the terrace. However, a man in his mid-40s joined her at the table approximately 10 minutes later. He identified himself as the assistant to the photographer and said he had been assigned to meet her and choose settings for the shoot that was to take place the next day. Elodie, who had no actual modeling experience, didn't think anything was wrong and believed him. The man spoke eloquently, had a polished appearance, and appeared to be fully aware of everything she had discussed with the photographer in the past. They had an easy conversation about Elodie's possible career. She was already picturing herself on the covers of famous publications and planning her spending of the money she would receive. The man proposed that they go search for the ideal spot for the shoot the following day at around 9 p.m., when darkness had completely descended. There are several locations for a breathtaking photo shoot in the lovely medieval town of Aigues-Mortes, which is full with towers, fortresses, and chapels. Emotional and still naive, Elodie and her new friend exited the bar and climbed into his vehicle. She was never again seen alive. What's chilly was the entire encounter seen by another individual who knew the offender intimately and had heard of his heinous intentions. Unfortunately, his attempts to step in were unsuccessful. That same evening, May 2, a terrified informant received a call at the Aigues-Mortes police station. According to a man in a panic, a young woman was in serious danger and something urgently needed to be done. He was certain there wasn't much time to act, but he didn't know the name of the possible victim or where she might have been taken. Dominique Tarasco, a 63-year-old nightclub owner who frequently served as an informant for the police, giving them sensitive information, was the caller. He claimed to have seen Guillaume Mingot, a friend of his, at the bar earlier that evening. Mingot was notoriously vicious and ruthless, and he had connections to the criminal underground. Mingot boasted the day before that he had met a gullible, attractive girl online and intended to kidnap her in order to sell her to a Spanish brothel for a high price. But it was hard to get the search going. The police knew time was of the importance, but they had no identity, no location, and no strong clues. They were named Elodie Morel by the following morning. She had been gone since the night before, and her phone was off, according to her anxious family, who called the police. They clarified that she had just disappeared after leaving for a photo shoot in another town. The police first failed to link the informant's call to this disappearance. Despite their suspicions that Elodie might have fled with a boyfriend, her family adamantly maintained that she would never leave her little son or vanish silently. Only 3 days after Elodie's disappearance did the search for her start. A waste of valuable time. For 2 of those days, Elodie was sadly still alive and imprisoned at a home in Aigues-Mortes, where she endured torture and abuse while her captors made decisions about how to end her questioning of the witness and arrest of the suspects. When Elodie Morel vanished on May 5, 2005, the lead investigators started to assume that she was the same enigmatic woman in peril that the source had warned about. When Dominique was called to the police to make an official statement, he instantly verified that Elodie was the same person he had seen at the pub with Guillaume Mingot 3 days prior, after seeing a picture of her. In response to a question about where he believed Mingot might be keeping the victim, Dominique said he had heard rumors of a recently closed deserted nightclub on the north side of town. That evening, a police unit established a stakeout at the scene and captured 48-year-old Guillaume Mingot and 53-year-old Richard Line as they entered the building. More research was necessary to determine the second man's involvement in this crime, as it was still uncertain. When authorities searched Mingot, they discovered Elodie Morel's credit card in one of his pockets, concluding that he was responsible for her disappearance. However, after a few hours, Line was freed because there was no proof against him, and both men were taken to the station to be questioned. Line, who had never run afoul of the police himself, lived with his family on the outskirts of town and was friendly with Guillaume. Mingot first stated in the first tale that he had taken Elodie's credit card and didn't know her. His initial account of events states that on May 2, he was at the pub when he spotted a pretty well-dressed woman. He chose to rob her because he thought she must be wealthy. Guillaume offered to buy Elodie a coffee after he sat down at her table and gave her a compliment. She didn't ask him to go, but she did say she was waiting for someone. After a little conversation, he was able to take her credit card from the purse that was hanging on her chair and slip away before she realized it was gone. Although Mingot acknowledged that he knew the victim, he maintained that the whole event happened on its own and that he had nothing to do with her abduction other than to steal her card. Investigators verified that he had taken out cash from an ATM outside the city using the pilfered card that same day, but he was unable to describe how he recognized the image. He would have had a weak story if Elodie hadn't told him. Furthermore, a background investigation showed that Mingot had a number of previous convictions, including drug trafficking, armed robbery, and a 9-year jail term for a vicious rape. Though he had been more cautious in an effort to avoid going to jail again, Mingot had not altered his behavior despite his criminal past after being released. When authorities discovered Elodie's phone number on Mingot's phone, along with their email correspondence regarding the photo shoot, the second story took a different path. He was forced to alter his story after this revelation, which totally contradicted his first statement. He admitted that he had messaged Elodie under the guise of a photographer after discovering her online modeling profile. The innocent beauty was a simple target and consented to meet without a lot of questioning. Mingot had been communicating with her under a female alias, so he was afraid she would grow suspicious when a man appeared in place of the photographer she had been anticipating. However, Elodie, who was eager and trusting, saw nothing odd and consented to accompany him to look for a spot for a late-night picture session. She even got into his car without question. Witnesses later attested to the fact that Guillaume swerved off the main road and halted the vehicle once they had reached a remote location. He insisted that Elodie give him her credit card while brandishing a gun. He took her handbag and located the card himself after she refused. Then he started asking for the PIN, but she refused to give it to him. In a fit of rage, he banged her head on the dashboard and began strangling her until she gave him the code. In order to make sure Elodie had told him the truth, Mingad then locked her in the trunk and drove to the closest ATM. He drained her account and the PIN worked, but now that he had the money, he began to think about what to do with the woman who was now imprisoned in his trunk, how to conceal the victim, and how to have the accomplices arrested. Guillaume Mingot drove to his buddy Richard Lyon's place to temporarily hide Elodie since he needed time to think things through. He told Richard about the woman who was trapped in his trunk and that he was eager to share his idea to sell her and make a significant profit. It's worth noting that Richard and his spouse had previously worked at the same shuttered nightclub, he as a security guard and she as a cleaner. However, after the club closed, they both lost their jobs and were barely making ends meet, with Richard turning to heavy drinking. Richard offered to help by giving Guillaume the keys to his empty garage, which he offered as a place to hide the woman. He preferred to wait for Guillaume to figure things out and to get his share of the money as soon as possible. Investigations later showed that Elodie was held captive for more than 2 days, during which she endured a nightmare of torture, assault, beatings, and the agony of hunger and thirst. Guillaume claims that during those 2 days he and Elodie spoke extensively, especially about their children, who were quite similar in age. Elodie pleaded that her son needed her and urged him to release her. According to Guillaume, there was a time when he genuinely felt terrible for her and was thinking about letting her leave. Since she had been in the garage for 2 days and it was quite hot, he even brought her a bottle of water. But when Richard, who was intoxicated, decided it was time to deal with the captive on the evening of May 4, things took a sharp turn. According to Guillaume, Richard went into the garage and used a rope to strangle Elodie while he was away. Guillaume maintained that he just assisted in disposing of the body and had nothing to do with the real crime, but he wouldn't say where they had concealed her body. The Lyon home was searched. The couple seemed anxious but unsurprised by what happened when police used a search warrant to raid the Lyon house. They showed little interest in the ongoing search, allowing the officers to enter without any opposition and continuing to dine at the kitchen table. Police discovered a number of Elodie's belongings in their teenage daughter's room during the inquiry, including a wristwatch, jewelry, a hair clip, and her cell phone. Richard's wife was also found to be in possession of Elodie's pocketbook and purse. The trash can outside the house contained ripped bits of the victim's clothing, along with other possessions. When Richard's garage, which is close to their house, was searched, even more unsettling evidence was found. Investigators discovered brown traces inside the unoccupied room that seemed to be dried blood. They discovered crumpled tissue as well. While their 14-year-old daughter was temporarily placed with family, Richard and his wife were arrested along with shoes, cigarette butts, an empty plastic bottle, and a piece of laundry rope. The couple stated that Guillaume had brought everything in return for permission to use their garage when asked how Elodie's possessions got inside their house. Since Guillaume had promised to compensate them, they acknowledged that they knew he was detaining a woman there, but decided not to intervene. They also admitted to providing him with a piece of rope and a bottle of water at his request without questioning why. Even more incriminating was the third-story forensics confirmation that Elodie's blood was responsible for the brown spots on the garage floor. Saliva on the cigarette butts was both the victim's and the kidnapper's, and semen on the crumpled tissues matched Guillaume's DNA. Since Elodie had asthma and cigarette smoke caused terrible coughing and choking episodes, her family swore that she had never smoked in her life. This made the horrific picture evident. For 2 days, Guillaume had held Elodie in the garage, hitting her repeatedly, torturing her, and making her smoke as part of his abuse, all while fabricating evidence and claims. Guillaume Mingot again altered his narrative once detectives showed him the forensic findings. This time, he asserted that it was completely voluntary for him and Elodie to have had sex in the garage. He claimed that after much conversation and smoking together, he had made the decision to let her leave, but he persisted in claiming that Richard Lyon had murdered her while he was away, allegedly out of concern that Richard would report Elodie to the police once Guillaume had freed her. The main contradiction in this account of events was that Richard had no justification for killing Elodie. She hadn't seen him or any of his family, and he hadn't even seen the captive. Second, she had been taken to the garage in a car's trunk, so she couldn't have led the police there because she didn't know where she was. Finally, Richard was just a regular drunk who couldn't hurt anyone. He was happy to accept payment in the form of Elodie's possessions and the assurance that his friend would give him money after everything was over. As previously noted, investigators discovered an empty plastic water bottle in the garage on the 4th story. Guillaume had said that he had brought Elodie some water out of sympathy. Tests, however, revealed that a significant amount of potent medications was present in the bottle's remaining liquid droplets. Elodie would probably have been comatose or barely awake after drinking such a concoction, enabling her kidnapper to do what he pleased. Guillaume once again lied when questioned about why he had drugged her. He now asserted that they had even decided she wouldn't approach the police and that he had been prepared to let her leave. As if it had been a bad dream, he said, Elodie simply wanted to return home to her family and forget about everything. He allegedly beat her during a struggle as she attempted to flee, which is why the garage floor was covered in bloodstains. He then locked her inside and departed. Guillaume claimed that in order to calm Elodie down and stop her from trying to flee again, he had given her the medications. After dissolving some tablets in water and crushing them, he left the garage and came back 12 hours later. Elodie was nearly collapsing from thirst by that point. Unaware of the odd flavor, she drank the water rapidly and dropped asleep a few minutes later. Guillaume said he hadn't thought of the possibility that she might have overdosed and died because her body wasn't strong enough to manage the medications. He put her body in the trunk of her own car, which had been left in the parking lot close to the bar where they had first met, as soon as he noticed she was no longer breathing. Using the keys he had stolen from Elodie, he drove the automobile to Richard's house a few hours later. There were further contradictions in Guillaume's tale, even though he still wouldn't reveal where he had transported the automobile with the body. Guillaume most certainly strangled Elodie, as evidenced by the sweat and skin residue on the rope discovered in the garage. The suspect was aware that all the evidence was against him. Guillaume made an agreement with investigators in the hopes of lowering his sentence, and he disclosed that he had left the automobile outside the old cemetery at Aigues Mortes. On May 7, the car was located precisely where he had promised. The body in the trunk had already started to deteriorate after 3 days of exposure to the blazing sun. The autopsy revealed obvious evidence of strangulation, beatings, and torture. The victim had been sexually assaulted, drugged, and restrained. Ultimately, they were strangled to death with a rope. The trial and sentencing. Almost 3 years after the horrifying events, in February 2008, the trial of the 3 criminals started. Guillaume Mégot was given a life sentence with the chance of release after 22 years. Richard Line and his spouse made a valiant effort to persuade the jurors that they were unaware of the hostage in their garage. They said they hadn't asked any questions, just let an old buddy stay with them for a few days. However, this was disproved when Elodie's possessions were found in their house. In 2010, the pair was found guilty of aiding and abetting and received 6-year prison sentences apiece. In an attempt to place some of the blame for the crime on the line, Guillaume Mégot and his attorney filed an appeal of the ruling. This was their sole chance to cut the minimum amount of time he would have to spend and reduce his life sentence. The new trial started on May 4, 2010, precisely 5 years after the murder of Elodie Morel. It was established during the hearings that Richard and his spouse were aware of Elodie's imprisonment and the potentially fatal situation she was in. But they took no action. They gave Guillaume everything he requested, including water, rope, and other items, without questioning his motives or taking the repercussions into account. They also kept her possessions, even giving some to their daughter. Guillaume Mégot's life sentence was lowered by the court to 30 years, with the condition that he complete 2/3 of it before he may be released on parole. Each received a 9-year prison sentence without the prospect of early release for their complicity and inaction. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. It was the 3rd of November, 2006. Justine Abshir, 27, was in the honeymoon period of her marriage. As a newlywed, she had much to look forward to. Justine wanted to have children. Justine adored her husband of just 5 months, Eric Abshir, who had 2 children from a previous relationship. They met in 1999 while both working at Lowe's home improvement store. Justine was a cashier, and Eric was her manager. She was only 20 years old. He was 26 and informed her that he had 2 young daughters. Following Eric's military service in the Marines, they married, and he started his own hauling business driving a dump truck. Justine also found a suitable position as a kindergarten teacher at Emerald Hill Elementary in Culpeper, VA. Justine went to work on November 3, but her colleagues noticed something was wrong. They noticed her seemingly swollen eyes and assumed she was crying. Justine, on the other hand, assured them that her condition was the result of allergies. Later that day, while pursuing her master's degree at UVA, she ran into her classmates again. She arrived 30 minutes late and wore sunglasses inside. When the class ended at 7 p.m., Justine left immediately. Her coworkers had no idea that it would be the last time they saw her. A distressing 911 call was received at 1:57 a.m. from Taylorsville Road in Barboursville, Virginia, reporting a hit and run. When the police arrived, they found Eric in a state of hysteria, cradling his lifeless wife, Justine, in the middle of the road. Unfortunately, Justine had died as a result of a car accident. Eric told the police that Justine called him at 1:19 a.m. to report a car breakdown and request assistance. She was approximately 5 miles from their home. Eric jumped on his motorcycle and rushed to the location she specified, only to find her lying on the road. Eric sat with Justine, covering her with his jacket, before setting out to find help. He approached several nearby houses and knocked on doors, hoping to find help. At 1:57 a.m., one of the homeowners called 911. Eric later admitted to the police that he had his cell phone in his pocket, but he hadn't realized it at the time. While on paper. Initially, the scene appeared to be a hit-and-run case. That viewpoint shifted very quickly. The police investigation revealed a lack of typical evidence related to a hidden run on Taylorsville Road in Barboursville, Virginia. Despite her severe injuries, Justine and her clothing showed no broken glass, skid marks, tire marks, debris, or blood. This absence led authorities to suspect that her death was not the result of a random collision, but rather of a deliberate act. The situation becomes even more complicated. Despite Eric's claims of mechanical problems, the police discovered that Justine's car was in good working order with no defects. This inconsistency raised questions about the veracity of Eric's account. Justine was very close to her parents, Heidi and Stephen Swartz, as well as her sister, Lauren Swartz, and they were devastated when Eric's brother called to tell them that Justine had died. Their shock and devastation turned into confusion. They knew Justine well. She was afraid of the darkness. She was even described as afraid of her own shadow, so they couldn't understand why she would choose to drive alone at night. The perplexity grew when her body was discovered 600 feet away from her car, which contained her purse, coat, and keys. This raised questions about why she would leave these belongings and walk away from the vehicle, especially after calling Eric to come and pick her up. Only 2 days after Justine's memorial service, an important revelation occurred. Heidi, Justine's mother, entered a restaurant and burst into tears. Sensing Heidi's distress, a compassionate restaurant employee offered to help, prompting Heidi to tell the heartbreaking story of Justine, the kindergarten teacher who was killed by a car. To Heidi's surprise, the woman revealed an astonishing fact. Justine had not died in a hit and run. She had been murdered, and her husband, Eric, was the primary suspect. It turned out that some people believe Eric was involved in Justine's death. When questioned by the police, Eric gave a detailed account of the evening, claiming that everything was normal. According to him, Justine returned home after 7 p.m., and he arrived shortly thereafter. He mentioned being with Justine for a while before getting a call from Martha Jefferson Hospital, where his ailing mother was. The call brought the distressing news of his mother's deteriorating health. Eric told the police that he returned to the hospital and remained there until 11:30 p.m. He did not return home immediately. Instead, he went to their storage unit on Route 33 in Rockfordville and stored his motorcycle. Eric left his car in the storage unit. took out his motorcycle and went riding. He told the cops he wanted to clear his mind. According to Eric's account, he returned home around 12:30 a.m. when Justine was awake and ready to talk. However, an argument arose between them when Justine wanted to discuss his mother's health, which Eric was hesitant to discuss. He informed the cops that he felt the need for solitude. In response, Justine allegedly said, "Well, maybe I need to be alone too." According to Eric, Justine left and drove away in her 2002 Ford Mustang. Eric told the cops he was unconcerned because he expected Justine to return and was casually watching television. His next contact with Justine came at 1:19 a.m. when she called him and was angry. She explained that her car had broken down and asked him to pick her up, specifying the exact location. He stated that it took him approximately 10-15 minutes to leave the house after receiving Justine's call, as he needed to put on his shoes, grab his jacket, keys, and helmet. Eric stated that he found her between 1:39 a.m. 1:44 a.m. The police found Eric's account suspicious, especially given the crime scene and Justine's injuries. This prompted them to conduct a thorough investigation into the events surrounding Justine's death. It will take 4 years, but the police will eventually have enough evidence to charge Eric. He was charged with first-degree murder of his wife. The prosecution claimed that Eric committed the murder with the intent to end his marriage and for financial gain. The court was informed that Justine had undergone a significant transformation in the months preceding the November incident. She stopped meeting with friends, ignored calls, and even turned down a friend's housewarming gift of flowers, citing Eric's ban on accepting gifts. The prosecution claimed Justine was killed somewhere else and then dumped on the road where she was discovered, as part of Eric's hit-and-run scheme. Their argument was that this was done to secure a $1.05 million insurance payout. According to the prosecution, Justine's injuries contradicted the theory of a vehicular collision. She suffered 113 blunt trauma injuries, including several broken bones, lacerated organs, and 23 head wounds. Surprisingly, there was little blood at the scene. The prosecution presented testimony from 2 medical examiners that called into question the notion that Justine died as a result of being hit by a car while standing on the road. Instead, they claimed that she was brutally assaulted, strangled, and then run over after death. Dr. Todd Civic, who conducted Justine's autopsy, testified that his findings were consistent with manual strangulation. He discovered deep tissue bruising in the neck muscles and hemorrhages in the eye and lip. He testified that Justine had sustained numerous severe internal injuries. Some wounds did not bleed, indicating that they occurred after Justine's death. He reported finding less than half of the blood he expected in her chest and abdominal cavities. The second medical examiner pointed out that the average female body contains 5 liters of blood, but Justine had less than 1 liter. This inconsistency, according to the prosecution, contradicted the scarcity of blood found on the road, supporting their claim that she was killed somewhere else. Susan Crawford, Eric's high school girlfriend and mother of his 2 children, testified that less than 2 hours before he discovered Justine on the road, he inquired about their future together. They exchanged 43 calls that day, during which Eric expressed his feelings for Allison. In court, Allison stated that he asked if there was any hope for our relationship, revealing Eric's admission of regret for marrying Justine. Another witness testified for the prosecution. Cecil Roebuck stated that he was on Greene County's side roads late that night looking for a school bus. He explained to the court that he was unfamiliar with the roads and pulled his car into a driveway to turn around. Cecil claimed that a man approached him and informed him that his wife's car was nearly out of gas. He asked Cecil to follow him to a gas station, but before they arrived, the man pulled over and informed Cecil that his car had run out of gas. He asked Cecil for a lift back to his house, and he agreed. Cecil stated that he did not associate the incident with Justine's case until 2 years later, when he saw a program about her death. He told the court that he thought the man was Eric and that he had helped him stage the hit and run, albeit unbeknownst to him at the time. The court was made aware of Eric's financial difficulties during the proceedings. Justine's father, Steve Swartz, testified in court and revealed that his daughter was the couple's primary credit holder, and at the time of her death, they owed $85,000. The insurance claims adjuster has testified about several policies with Eric as the beneficiary. Less than a fortnight after Justine's death, Eric filed an uninsured motorist claim that, if approved, would have awarded him $100,000, with the possibility of an additional $1.05 million if the commercial aspect was approved. Notably, Justine's name appeared on the insurance for one of the dumpster trucks. In 2009, Eric filed for bankruptcy and received $330,000 to pay off his outstanding debts. This financial backdrop enriched the court's understanding of the case. During the trial, some evidence was presented in the absence of the jury, including allegations about an affair Eric allegedly had a month before his wedding and 3 days after Justine's death. Furthermore, it was suggested that he had explicit photos of a woman, but destroyed them to avoid negative perceptions. The prosecution claimed that Eric's cell phone records contradicted his claim of being at Martha Jefferson Hospital, claiming that he was actually at home during critical periods. This, according to the prosecution, gave him enough time to commit the crime. They told the jury that 2 periods late in the evening and into the following morning were particularly important, beginning at 10:04 p.m. until 11:20, 3 p.m., until 11:20, 3 p.m., and from 12:08 a.m. When a call came in from Justine's phone at 1:19 a.m., the cell phone record showed that he was at home, not in the hospital. The prosecution emphasized to the jury that Eric used his phone 157 times on the day of the incident, making his claim of only realizing it was in his pocket after discovering Justine's body highly implausible. Furthermore, the prosecution highlighted Eric's background as a Marine with key PR and first aid training, claiming that despite this training, he made no attempt to assist Justine. The prosecution revealed a compelling and unsettling detail. Eric had a derogatory nickname for Justine, calling her Thing. The defense maintained that Justine's death was the result of a hit-and-run accident. They maintained that Eric's alibi was credible, claiming that he was at Martha Jefferson Hospital until 11:30 p.m., visiting his mother, and then went to a storage unit to get his motorcycle. The defense argued that the prosecution's timeline did not allow Eric enough time to kill Justine and stage a hit and run in support of their claim of a happy marriage. The defense presented Eric's brother as a witness who had lived with the couple for some time. He testified to the genuine happiness in Eric and Justine's relationship, emphasizing his positive interactions with Justine to refute the prosecution's claim. The defense challenges the credibility of witness Cecil. They suspected he was motivated by a $50,000 reward for information offered by Justine's parents, as well as a desire to receive favorable treatment in relation to 2 felony fraud charges he was facing over a $10,000 debt. The defense sought to undermine Cecil's credibility as a witness, questioning his motives and potential bias. Despite the defense's efforts to challenge the case, including claims about the medical examiner's alleged failure to perform a specific procedure, the jury ultimately found Eric guilty of first-degree murder. The decision was made using the evidence presented at trial, which included the prosecution's arguments about the nature of Justine's injuries, the timeline of events, and Eric's actions. Eric was sentenced to life in prison after being found guilty of the charges. During Eric's sentencing hearing, the court heard moving victim impact statements, including one from Justine's sister, Lauren. Lauren stated that for the 7 years preceding her death by Eric, "I watched my sister's life deteriorate. She became quiet, withdrawn, poor, scared, and a victim of domestic violence, all of which I witnessed firsthand. In retrospect, I feel like I witnessed her death." Lauren's testimony at the sentencing hearing painted a distressing picture of Eric and Justine's relationship. She claimed that she saw Eric physically shove Justine before they married. Justine also confided in her about several other instances of abuse. Justine's family and friends noticed a shift in her personality in the months leading up to November 28th. Justine had always been kind, loving, and friendly, and while she retained those qualities, she stopped meeting with friends and colleagues for social occasions. She was withdrawn and silent, a shell of her former self. The testimony also revealed that Justine, driven by a sense of worthlessness, went to great lengths to please Eric. Even on their wedding day, there were signs of discord. Eric was distant, preferring to go out on his motorcycle alone. Justine missed several wedding-related activities, including lunch, and spent the second night alone in the hotel. Notably, Eric's violent past came to light during the hearing. He had previously been charged with malicious wounding and was under a protective order from the mother of his 2 children. Eric claimed that this was the result of a verbal disagreement that escalated into a physical altercation, in which he attacked him and hit him in the face with a remote control. Through self-defense, he claimed to have grabbed her shirt and throat. Throughout the 4 years that police investigated the case, Justine's family fought tirelessly to ensure that justice was served. Her father, Steve Swartz, stated that, in addition to wanting Justine's case resolved, he sincerely hopes that no one else is hurt before that occurs. Share your opinion with us in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more. Hey guys, today we're diving into another truly horrifying case. If you want to support my channel, make sure to subscribe and stay active. It really helps me out. I'd be super grateful for that. Let's get started. A young woman's lifeless body was found in the state of Morelos on the side of an abandoned road. When they discovered her, the onlookers called the police right away. The body was still. She had obvious bruising and abrasions on her skin, and her clothes were wrinkled and discolored. Authorities were unable to locate any personal possessions or documentation that would have helped identify her in the area. This signaled the start of an inquiry to clarify the events and determine the causes of this catastrophe. Born in one of Mexico City's impoverished districts on July 5, 1995, Ariadna Fernanda Lopez Diaz, despite having few finances, her early years were filled with love and affection. Her mother and her older brother Omar made up her family. Mutual support kept the small family together in spite of the lack of a father figure who was uninterested in his kids. Omar gave Ariadna constant support and became into a protector and role model for her. Because of their strong relationship, Ariadna felt secure knowing that she could always count on someone. Ariadna was well liked by her peers because of her friendly and affable demeanor. She stood out for her genuineness and willingness to assist people, and she had a natural aptitude to make friends. She spent a lot of her school years with close companions, with whom she frequently discussed her future aspirations. But in 2018, when Ariadna was only 23, her mother was afflicted with cancer, leaving her youth tainted by a devastating loss. The family eventually had to confront the inevitable as the sickness advanced quickly. For both Ariadna and Omar, losing her mother was a heartbreaking blow. In addition to deepening their relationship, this catastrophe made Ariadna grow up fast and accept responsibility for her own life. She made sure her mother's presence was always with her by getting her name permanently inked as an homage to her mother. Ariadne had met a young man and quickly started seeing him before to the death of her mother. Ariadne soon found out she was expecting a kid, as their romance progressed swiftly. The young couple quickly recognized their paths were separating though, since the arrival of her kid did not provide the stability she had hoped for. Following their separation, they continued to have a cordial relationship while sharing custody of their son. Having a child presented new difficulties. In order to support herself and her son, Ariadna had to juggle the responsibilities of parenthood with her job search. Getting a job at a well-known bar in Mexico City was the first step on this adventure. This place, which was frequented by wealthy customers, had high standards for its employees. Ariadne developed her capacity to communicate with a diverse range of people here. She thrived in her position in spite of the problems, overcoming them with her charm and tenacious work ethic. Her life was drastically altered by the pandemic. Despite losing her job because the company where she worked closed, Ariadne resisted giving up. Instead, she opened her own beauty salon during this time to fulfill a lifelong dream. This endeavor came to represent her will and ambition to create a life free from other influences. Using her vast network and skills, she was able to start a business that gave her a reliable source of income. A new connection came into her life at this period. She clicked with a man she met right away. She found security and happiness in her relationship. Between her spouse, her job, and her son, Ariadna managed her time well. Despite having a busy schedule, she managed to find joy in every new chance. By the time Ariadne was 27, her life had taken on the appearance of a finished puzzle, with each obstacle and accomplishment adding to a picture of tenacity and accomplishment. She had experienced loss, started over, taken care of her son's future, and become independent. But what appeared to be the beginning of a happy chapter was actually the beginning of a tragedy. Vanessa was introduced to Ariadne by mutual connections. Ariadne and her pals went to an event where they first interacted. Ariadne was immediately drawn to Vanessa because she was youthful, lively, and captivating. Vanessa was able to establish a connection with people quite fast. Those who knew her well, however, felt conflicted about her. Her acts frequently shocked people with their unpredictable nature, and beneath her seeming openness were jagged edges. A common figure in Vanessa's social circle was the middle-aged businessman Rautel. Rumors surrounded his reputation. Prominent for his wealth, power, and extravagant way of living, he was frequently spotted with young women who wanted to be a part of his world. Rumors of his ties to influential people and even criminal organizations helped to elevate his stature, but no one in his inner circle could verify these claims. Although Rautel shied away from discussing his background and business operations directly, his manner evoked both admiration and discomfort. Despite her intelligence and independence, Ariadne was not immediately aware of the differences between her new acquaintances and her regular group of friends. Eager to make an impression, Vanessa frequently spoke about her relationships with Rautel and other powerful individuals. She portrayed him as having the ability to resolve any issue. Ariadne gradually started to spend more time with them. Vanessa made an effort to earn Ariadne's trust and appeared to be truly enthralled with her. After hearing about Ariadne from Vanessa, Rautel became interested in her right away. His attentiveness and conversational skills surprised her at their first meeting. His charm and confidence were irresistible, and Ariadne was no exception to his appeal. However, a more nuanced personality lay beneath this appeal. Rautel's manipulative tendencies were observed by anyone who interacted with him. However, Ariadne thought he was a decent and kind man. Vanessa remained essential in reinforcing the bond between Rautel and Ariadne. She created an environment of openness and trust by often inviting Ariadne to events where Rautel was present. But as time went on, strange information emerged. For example, Ariadne was cautioned by some of her friends to exercise caution when interacting with these individuals. Some were aware of Vanessa's erratic behavior and Rautel's dubious reputation. They suggested that these interactions might have unspoken dangers. Ariadne saw no threat in her new social group, even in spite of the warnings. She viewed her friendship with Vanessa as a chance to escape from her everyday obligations and discover a world that had previously been unattainable. Rautel, however, made an effort to gain her favor by being kind and generous. She found his invitations to parties and dinners intriguing and innocuous. As we know, Ariadne was seeing a young man. Nevertheless, based on the information at hand, she continued to cultivate acquaintances and occasionally accepted invitations to social gatherings. Her boyfriend didn't show displeasure with her social contacts and was a trustworthy individual. Ariadne gradually realized that her life was beginning to be impacted by her new relationships. Vanessa contacted her often, offering to arrange get-togethers and leisure activities. Rautel, on the other hand, made a greater effort to establish himself in Ariadne's life and frequently provided assistance and support in a variety of circumstances. Unaware of the possible repercussions, Ariadne was slowly but surely losing herself in their world. Ariadne accepted Vanessa's invitation to get out with friends on October 30, 2022. The event was scheduled to start at Fisher's, a well-known eatery in Mexico City's downtown. Vanessa reassured her that the evening would be pleasant, with a leisurely meal and pleasant companionship. Ariadne felt a little uneasy because Rautel was also supposed to join. She was beginning to have doubts about him, but she chose not to turn him down since she didn't want to jeopardize her friendship with Vanessa. Later that night, the group gathered at the restaurant, which was well known for its fashionable patrons and elegant interiors. It served as a vibrant background for the event. An assortment of canapés and wine cocktails contributed to the lively and joyous ambiance at the table. Rautel made himself the focus of attention as usual, toasting and telling stories. He went out of his way to demonstrate his power and engaged with the waitstaff with assurance. Vanessa encouraged him by interjecting remarks and jokes to keep the discussion going. Following their example, the other guests attempted to match the host's enthusiasm for the evening. Amidst the boisterous atmosphere, Ariadne's actions were particularly noticeable, frequently checking her phone, reading texts, and sending out comments. She didn't seem quite comfortable. She frequently kept her eyes on Rautel, as though she were trying to find some deeper significance in his words or deeds. In an attempt to divert her attention, Vanessa drew her into discussions and urged her to take another cocktail. Ariadne, however, stayed taciturn. Something was bothering her more than the surroundings based on her look. Ariadne shared a mysterious message on social media in the middle of the evening. "Would you miss me if I vanished?" Although many in her wider network thought it was a joke, this post caused anxiety among her close friends and family. But Ariadne had never written anything like this before, according to those who knew her well. Although no one could have foreseen that it would be her final post, it made an uncomfortable impact. The party made the decision to relocate to Rautel's residence as the evening wore on. Rautel himself made the suggestion, and Vanessa wholeheartedly agreed, stating that it would enable them to spend the rest of the evening in a more private situation. After some hesitation, Ariadne consented, and after Vanessa encouraged her to join the others, they all piled into Rautel's car and drove the short distance to his house. Rautel's home, which was situated in a posh area, demonstrated his prestige. The interior was decorated in a contemporary style with opulent elements. When they arrived, the party took up residence in a large living room. Ariadne became more uneasy as the evening went on, despite the music and cocktails. As she checked her phone and pretended to make calls, she moved away multiple times. Her focused and aloof manner was not unnoticed. When Vanessa noticed this, she started whispering to her Rautel, which made the situation even more tense. Ariadne declared she was tired and wanted to go home closer to midnight, but Vanessa persuaded her to wait a bit longer, saying they could depart in around 30 minutes. As the evening wore on and the other guests began to go, Rautel, who was unusually silent at that time, would periodically look at Ariadne in a way that made her feel even more uneasy. Ariadne was among the last to go. Sadly, none of the gang would ever see her alive. An incident rocked Morelos the next morning, October 31, 2022, when two bikers discovered a woman's death on the side of a distant road while out on an early morning ride. Locals hardly ever visited the area, which was remote from any major roadways. The bleak landscape, scant vegetation, and eerie quiet of the surrounding area all served to highlight the tragedy. Although the woman was dressed, her clothes were filthy and seemed to be broken. Numerous bruises and what seemed to be contusions were seen on her body. Law enforcement was notified of the occurrence by witnesses right away, and they arrived a few hours later to record the incident and possibly help identify the body. The cyclists snapped pictures of the area in the interim. As soon as the police showed up, they roped off the area and started gathering evidence. Mark suggested that the body had been moved, and tire traces were discovered in the ground. Although there were obvious indications of a struggle, forensic experts were unable to determine the cause of death. Since there were no obvious injuries from a weapon, it was challenging to pinpoint the precise circumstances of the tragedy. Since no personal belongings or paperwork were discovered with the woman, her identity was unknown at the time. Pictures of the body started making the rounds on social media a few hours later, and people who saw them started talking about them. They were Ariadne's friends and relatives, who had been missing since going to a party at Rautel's house. They were able to identify the victim's distinguishing characteristics, such as tattoos. Omar, her brother, feared the worst and reported the woman missing to the police, speculating that she might be his sister. Meanwhile, the investigation was started by the Morelos state authorities. However, there was a lot of criticism directed at the police's early response. Critical traces at the site were not adequately documented, and there were reports of violations of evidence-gathering rules. This cast suspicion on the professionalism and moral character of the local police force. Their suspicions were validated when Ariadne's family members showed up to formally identify the body. His sister had a tattoo honoring their late mother on her shoulder, which Omar recognized. Her body's condition, bruises and injuries on her arms and face obviously indicated a violent incident, made the family's heartbreaking shock even worse. But at the time, the police's official comments sounded dubious and offered no clarification. The family's first reaction was to demand justice. They started calling for responsibility for those involved and an open probe. To raise awareness of the situation, they contacted acquaintances who were active on social media that same day. A little initiative soon gained momentum and attracted thousands of participants. The Morelos police insisted that the killing might have been an accident despite the growing public criticism. Further investigation would be contingent upon the completion of a forensic examination, they said. This position simply increased suspicions that powerful people might be engaged in hiding the truth and stoked further concerns. Since Rautel and Vanessa were the last to see Ariadne alive, They were the first people investigators got in touch with. The first speculations regarding what might have happened were based on their statements. According to Rautel's original story, Ariadne called a cab to leave his residence after the party. She didn't exhibit any signs of serious distress, but she did seem a little upset, he said. He claims that once he led her to the door, she departed. Vanessa backed up his account by saying that Ariadne had actually gone in a taxi and hadn't stated where she was going. But their versions' contradictions soon sparked doubts. The absence of any proof proving a cab ride was the first warning sign. Raufel and Vanessa were unable to produce the driver's contact details or any evidence to support their claims. Investigators eventually found that none of the drivers recalled picking up Ariadne, despite the fact that multiple taxi calls had been recorded in the vicinity of Rautel's home that evening. The behavior of Vanessa was the second problem. Depending on what was questioned, her story changed. At first, she maintained that Ariadne had gone out on her own. She went on to say that they had argued at the party, which might have angered Ariadne. Additionally, in reference to the mysterious social media post Ariadne had written earlier that evening, Ariadne's friends informed police that Vanessa had messaged them in an attempt to imply that Ariadne might have hurt herself. Even though Ariadne's family and close friends initially thought the post, which was published just hours before she vanished, was a joke, investigators started to worry it might be a reflection of her actual emotional condition that evening. Vanessa's increasingly unpredictable behavior was another concerning element. She was attempting to minimize the problem and omit specifics in her texts to Ariadne's pals. She acknowledged in one text that she was scared of being implicated, but she didn't say why. Investigators' suspicions that Vanessa might be hiding important information were further heightened by these indicators. The investigation's preliminary conclusions were equivocal about the precise circumstances surrounding Ariadne's demise, but later investigations by law enforcement and outside specialists turned up important evidence. These conclusions were supported by security footage, text messages found on the suspects' phones, and 2 autopsies. According to the first forensic report in the state of Morelos, Ariadne's death was due to asphyxiation from bronchial aspiration. According to the examiner, she may have died as a result of food and drink getting into her airways. However, Ariadne's family quickly questioned this judgment. Despite the official conclusions, they drew attention to the many bruises and injuries on her body that were not sufficiently addressed in the report. Under pressure from the family and the public, her family insisted on a second exam. For additional examination, Ariadne's body was moved to a separate forensic facility in Mexico City. The first conclusions were entirely at odds with the findings of the second autopsy. Numerous injuries, including head trauma, bruises, and signs of physical force on her arms and legs, were discovered by experts, indicating that she may have tried to defend herself. These results demonstrated that alcohol was not the only factor in her death, or that it was not an accident. Authorities reclassified the case as a criminal conduct when her death was deemed to be the consequence of violent acts. Surveillance footage taken from Rautel's home's parking garage was essential to the investigation. In one video, the morning after the party, Rautel was seen taking Ariadne's motionless body to his car. He was also seen on camera packing her body into the car and driving off. These recordings turned into unquestionable proof linking him to the body's movement and eventual concealment. Investigators found communications about Rautel and Vanessa's behavior after the party after seizing their phones. Attempts to coordinate their accounts for law enforcement and defend their actions to Ariadne's pals were exposed in the texts. Rautel assured Vanessa that everything was under control, but Vanessa voiced worry about the pressure from Ariadne's family. Even specific guidelines on how to respond to inquiries without arousing suspicion were included in one reply. Vanessa frequently implied that Ariadne might have been experiencing emotional turmoil and perhaps considered self-harm in her chats with Ariadne's acquaintances. Ariadne's acquaintances claimed that she was a happy, energetic girl who showed no indications of such tendencies, which ran counter to this story. Suspicion of Vanessa's involvement was heightened by these discrepancies. Investigators came to the conclusion that the earlier allegations of an accidental death or Ariadne leaving Rautel's home freely did not match the evidence from the second autopsy, surveillance footage, and retrieved texts, which provided a better picture of what had happened. The violent nature of Ariadne's death and the subsequent concealing of her body were amply demonstrated by the evidence. These conclusions served as the basis for the accusations made against Rautel and Vanessa, who would shortly stand trial for their crimes. The first person arrested was Vanessa. Investigators found that she had been communicating with Rautel continuously. They talked about avoiding accountability in the days after the incident. The public was closely watching her arrest. Vanessa stated during her first interrogations that she was not responsible for Ariadna's killing. However, her claims were contradicted. Vanessa maintained that she was not aware of what happened following the incident because she had gone to bed early the night before. A fact check of her statements, however, uncovered up contradictions. Text exchanges revealed that she had spoken with Rautel about the specifics and was fully aware of what had transpired. In an attempt to hide her role in the crime's cover-up, investigators also found that Vanessa purposefully erased communications, pictures, and other potentially damaging material. Rautel decided to turn himself in to the police after realizing the growing evidence against him. He declared his innocence while accompanied by his attorneys, claiming that he did not hurt Ariadna but rather panicked and tried to conceal her body out of concern for the repercussions. He claims that the morning after the party, he discovered Ariadna unconscious in his house and, thinking she was dead, chose to dispose of the body to allay suspicions. But there were significant questions about his account of what happened. First, the second autopsy's findings refuted his allegations by confirming a violent cause of death. Second, instead of calling for assistance, he was seen on security camera carrying the body while making obvious attempts to conceal his conduct. Furthermore, as the investigation went on, his text exchanges with Vanessa showed a concerted attempt to agree on fabricated accounts of what had transpired. Concerning information emerged regarding possible corruption between Rautel and the Morelos prosecutor's office. The state's first autopsy report had purposefully left out mentions of injuries that were obviously signs of violence. The prosecutor was accused by activists and Ariadne's family of absolving Rautel of responsibility by leveraging their position. Public indignation was sparked by these accusations. An internal affairs division commenced an investigation into potential misconduct, and Mexico City officials began reviewing the Morelos prosecutor's activities. According to some witnesses, Rautel had ties to criminal organizations, which may account for his seeming assurance in evading punishment. The case received a lot of attention and came to represent structural problems in the legal system as well as the need of public pressure in seeking justice. At least one of the suspects knew more about what happened that night than they were ready to acknowledge, according to additional interrogations and evidence gathered. However, neither Vanessa nor Rautel took direct blame. Instead, they centered their explanations on attempts to defend one another's acts. This only served to increase suspicions and was a major contributing cause to their brief detention. A protracted and thorough inquiry was conducted into the causes and motivations behind the tragedy that transpired that evening. It took meticulous event reconstruction, evidence analysis, and a detailed look at everyone's behavior during the party to uncover the truth. With the help of contradictory testimony, technical information, and the suspect's psychological profiles, a more comprehensive picture gradually started to take shape. Together with mutual friends, Ariadna, Vanessa, and Rautel started that fateful evening over dinner and drinks at a restaurant in downtown Mexico City. Everything appeared normal on the surface: music, laughter, and conversation, but minute nuances suggested underlying stress. Witness accounts and a review of text conversations revealed that Ariadne seemed particularly silent and distracted. Her habit of checking her phone a lot, sending messages, and taking calls was unusual for her at social events. Later on in the investigation, this fact became crucial. Her communications showed that she had been messaging a close friend to express her anxiety about the party and her worries about certain guests. The group left the restaurant and went to the hotel's residence. The property, which had security cameras and high walls around it, was often used for private parties. The hosts, Vanessa and Rautel, appeared to have strained chemistry. According to witnesses, Vanessa made a number of scathing comments about Ariadna, who handled them calmly in an effort to avoid conflict. Alcohol started to affect the group's conduct as the evening went on. Already emotionally agitated, Vanessa allegedly yelled at Ariadne many times, calling her rude and unwelcoming. These charges increased the already rising tension but didn't strike a chord with the other members of the group. Rautel, on the other hand, was obviously unhappy with Vanessa's actions but seemed to maintain his neutrality. Witnesses' reports of Ariadna trying to leave the party early the following morning marked a turning point. She reappeared shortly after being spotted outside the residence. Investigators found that Vanessa persisted in confronting Ariadna throughout this period, resulting in an open dispute between the two. The specifics of the altercation are still unknown. Investigators believe Vanessa accused Ariadne of attracting Rautel's undue attention. After the majority of the attendees had departed the party, only Vanessa, Rautel, and Ariadna were remaining in the house. Messages recovered from the phones verified that Vanessa and Rautel had talked about difficult events from that evening. Investigators said that Vanessa, who was allegedly very drunk, started acting aggressively. An incident that is thought to have occurred during this time is what caused Ariadne's fatal injuries. What was the reason behind Ariadne's peculiar social media post that evening? After being written off as a joke at first, the message gained significance as the inquiry progressed. Friends subsequently acknowledged that Vanessa's actions and the general ambiance of the event might have made Ariadne uncomfortable. The tweet could have been an attempt to draw attention to herself, communicate her uneasiness, or perhaps act as a subliminal warning. According to the reconstruction of events, a major contributing factor to the catastrophe was Vanessa's envy, which was made worse by drink and mental instability. Rautel's actions, which were probably an attempt to hide what had transpired, simply made matters worse. If the atmosphere at the party had not been so tight and unstable, this confluence of circumstances could have prevented the disastrous result. Omar, Ariadna's older brother, was left to be the only father figure in the life of her 6-year-old son. Omar stepped in to offer both emotional and financial help. As he assumed responsibility for his nephew's upbringing, he worked to preserve Ariadna's memories and show him the love she had always shown him throughout her life. Since other family members and friends helped the youngster deal with his loss and provide him with a loving atmosphere, this choice strengthened the bonds within the family. The family of Ariadne continued to be involved in the effort to learn the whole facts regarding her passing. They attracted public attention, started social media campaigns, and planned protests. One noteworthy accomplishment was attracting the attention of foreign media, which contributed to a rise in pressure on the Mexican legal system. The initial judicial proceedings concerning Ariadne's demise turned out to be a crucial point in the fight for justice. The family and their legal team made sure that the case was handled openly and honestly, taking into account all pertinent facts, even in the face of opposition from some authorities. The public and media kept a watchful eye on every stage of the inquiry and trial, making it difficult for any facts to be concealed or misrepresented. Rautel and Vanessa's positions in court proceedings were the main topic of discussion at the start of the trial. Key evidence offered by the prosecution included text message data, phone call logs, and security footage. These documents showed the defendants' possible involvement in the violent acts that resulted in Ariadna's death, in addition to their involvement in hiding the body. By claiming that the tragedy was an unfortunate accident, the defense tried to refute the facts, although a number of testimony and forensic analyses seriously put doubt on that account. Determining the motivations behind the crime was one of the trial's main goals. According to witnesses who knew Vanessa well, she was impulsive and prone to aggressive conduct, which was frequently made worse by drink. However, Rautel's portrayal as having a dubious past and purported connections to criminal organizations raised further questions over his role in that night's events. However, the defendants denied any involvement in Ariadne's demise. Suspicions were heightened by the fact that their claims contradicted the evidence. The investigation and judicial proceedings in Ariadne's case are still ongoing, so a verdict has not yet been rendered. Prosecutors have charged her with femicide, a felony including gender-based violence that is thought to be an aggravating factor under Mexican law, based on the evidence they have acquired. Both suspects may spend up to 70 years behind bars if found guilty. Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. In May 2007, a suspect was formally identified by Portuguese police looking into the disappearance of 3-year-old Madeleine McCann, who vanished while on vacation in the Algarve 15 years ago. 3-year-old Madeleine McCann disappeared from her family's vacation rental in Praia da Luz, Portugal, on May 3, 2007. The investigation reached a number of dead ends, in spite of extensive worldwide media coverage and extensive searches conducted in several nations, including Portugal, the UK, Spain, Germany, and Morocco. Time and resources were wasted as a result of the deluge of misleading hints, unreliable reports, and unconfirmed tips. Every lead was followed by major media outlets like the BBC, Sky News, and The Guardian, but none of them produced the breakthrough that everyone had been hoping for. Did authorities discover her whereabouts years later? Why has this case remained one of the most perplexing disappearances in history? And what went wrong? Now, let's explore the narrative. Interest in the enigmatic disappearance of Madeleine McCann has been rekindled by a new search in a new location. When she was a toddler on a family vacation in Portugal in 2007, she vanished. Every family wished for a vacation like this one. Kate and Jerry McCann, both in their late 30s, had been putting in a lot of effort in their respective medical professions. They decided it was time for a break after years of juggling their family and work lives. They made travel arrangements to Portugal's Algarve, a well-liked vacation spot for British families. On May 3, 2007, they left for what was supposed to be a quiet week at the Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz with their 3 kids, twins Sean and Amélie, as well as their oldest daughter, Madeleine. At the time, Madeleine, their 3rd child, was 3 years old. The family stayed at the resort in a spacious, cozy apartment. Despite the basic lodging, the location was ideal for a restful vacation. The McCanns were a close-knit, loving, and well-educated family that was perfect in many respects. In addition to being doctors, Kate and Jerry were also loving parents who were very involved in their kids' lives. They chose a family-friendly resort with a kids' club and lots of activities because they had carefully planned their trip. They weren't the kind to take chances or neglect the security of their kids. Actually, the resort was known for being safe, so they were at ease knowing that their kids would be protected while they spent some peaceful time together. But everything would change on the night of May 3, 2007. A night that nobody could have foreseen. After spending the day at the resort, Kate and Jerry McCann made the decision to have a quiet dinner with friends at a nearby tapas restaurant on the evening of May 3, 2007. In their apartment, their 3 kids, Madeleine, Amélie, and Sean, were fast asleep. The couple took turns checking on them and felt at ease leaving them alone for brief periods of time. Kate checked on the children at 9:30 p.m. She discovered that everything was in order. Madeleine seemed to be sleeping soundly in her bed, and Sean and Amélie were both sleeping soundly. Their friend, who was staying next door, Matthew Oldfield, later offered to come see how the kids were doing. The door to the children's bedroom was open when he went to check on himself, but he didn't look any further and couldn't remember if the window or shutter was open. Kate returned to see how the kids were doing at around 10 o'clock at night. The patio doors were unlocked when she stepped inside. Due to an open window, the door of the children's bedroom slammed shut on its own as she attempted to close it. At that moment, she noticed that Madeleine was gone and that the window and its shutter were open. Kate yelled, "Madeleine's gone," as she hurried back to the restaurant in panic. "She's been taken." Approximately 10:10 p.m., Matthew Oldfield was asked by Jerry McCann to go to the resort's reception and call the police on May 3, 2007. At 10:30, hotel employees and visitors started the resort's missing child procedure by looking around for Madeleine. After searching for hours, they still couldn't find her, although at first they thought she might have gone missing. Together with their friends, the McCanns broadened their search by calling Madeleine's name and knocking on doors. Panic increased as the evening wore on. Their fear only grew as each minute seemed to drag on for an hour. Even though Kate and Jerry were desperate to find their daughter, it seemed to be getting harder as time went on. Despite their best efforts to remain strong for their other children, they were overcome with pain and anxiety, and the uncertainty was nearly unbearable. But the police's reaction wasn't the best. Around 11:10 p.m., 2 Guardia Nacional Republicana (GNR) officers showed up at the resort. Following a quick search, they called the criminal police, or Policia Judiciaria (PJ), who showed up at around 1 in the morning. Search dogs were brought in by 2 a.m., and by 8 a.m. the police had broadened their search to include nearby caves, wells, and waterways. But during what are referred to as the golden hours of a missing person case, errors were made. Roadblocks did not appear right away, and it took hours for border and marine police to be notified. Numerous resort employees were never interviewed, and important surveillance footage was never requested. After samples were sent to 3 forensic labs, Madeleine's bedroom was found to contain the DNA of an unidentified stranger. However, the evidence might have been compromised because by the time the apartment was sealed off, about 20 people had already entered the room. The investigation was further delayed when Interpol took 5 days to issue a global missing person alert. It was useless by the time the police put tape across the door at 3 in the morning. Crowds were reportedly assembling outside the apartment, including close to the window of the kid's bedroom, which is where the kidnapper may have entered. Even police officers contaminated the scene by handling the evidence improperly. One even dusted the window shutter for fingerprints without gloves. Robert Murat, a British-Portuguese property consultant, was the first suspect 12 days after Madeleine McCann vanished. Murat, who had been involved in the case and offered to assist with translations, lived close to the McCannans' apartment. He was questioned and his house and possessions were searched extensively, but no evidence connected him to Madeleine's disappearance was found. After his suspect status was revoked in July 2008, he was awarded hefty damages for defamation. Portuguese police did not take the McCann's suggestion in June 2007 to use a former police officer's matter orientation system to help find their daughter seriously. The Portuguese police responded by writing to the British government to request more help. As a result, Keela and Eddie, 2 British sniffer dogs, arrived in July 2007. The investigation took a darker turn, despite the fact that there was no proof whatsoever that Madeleine was dead or that the McCannses were responsible for her disappearance. A number of witnesses reported seeing suspicious people in the vicinity of apartment 5A in the days preceding Madeleine's disappearance, including a man acting strangely close to the apartment and men collecting money for fictitious charities. A man with blonde hair was also frequently spotted observing the McCannans' block. In spite of this, the investigation did not immediately make any progress. However, what took place that evening? Was a random crime the cause of Madeleine's disappearance? Or was there a darker motive at work? The reasons behind her disappearance have been the subject of several theories, some of which we will discuss later. Let's examine the DNA analysis in more detail for the time being. Hair and fibers from apartment 5A and the McCann's vehicle were sent for DNA analysis in August 2007. The findings on August 8 moved the investigation from kidnapping to murder. The forensic lab employed a contentious, easily contaminated low-copy number DNA technique. A partial match to Madeleine's DNA was discovered in the car's boot on September 3, but the findings were not conclusive. This raised questions about the validity of the results by implying that the DNA might belong to several different people. The McCanns were formally designated as arguidos, suspects, by September 2007. Although DNA evidence from the apartment and their rental car was provided, the findings were ambiguous and complicated. In spite of this, the Portuguese police urged the McCanns to confess and speculated that Madeleine might have died in an accident. Due to a lack of evidence, the case was later archived in 2008 after receiving progressively negative media coverage. A thorough police investigation was warranted for Madeleine McCann. A dearth of evidence presented significant difficulties for the investigation in the days after Madeleine McCann vanished. No forensic evidence indicated a crime scene, no indications of forced entry into the apartment, and no definitive answers regarding Madeleine's fate were found. The following theories surfaced. 1. During an abduction by a sex offender, many initially thought that Madeleine had been kidnapped by a sex offender who had broken into the apartment while the McCanns were eating. The door to the children's bedroom was discovered ajar, and suspicious men were spotted all over the resort. But there were concerns about how the kidnapper could have gotten in undetected or without leaving any evidence of forced entry. 2. Robbery wrong. According to a different theory, Madeleine was taken during a robbery that went awry. It's possible that thieves broke into the apartment to take valuables, but when they discovered the kids inside, they kidnapped Madeleine. Witnesses reported seeing suspicious men around the apartment, and there had been several reported burglaries in the area. 3. Accident and cover-up. According to this theory, Madeline may have overdosed on medication or died in another accident while she was in the apartment. The McCanns may have attempted to conceal the death and make it seem like an abduction in a panic. Although some investigators noted discrepancies in the McCanns' account, this theory was not substantiated by any tangible evidence. 4. Suspicious woman. On the evening of May 3, 2007, a number of witnesses claimed to have seen an odd woman close to the McCanns' apartment. Although she was said to be acting strangely and wearing a purple top, there was no evidence linking her to Madeline's disappearance. Though each theory had its proponents, none of them was able to provide a definitive explanation for Madeline's disappearance. The mystery remained unsolved, despite the investigation's continued exploration of every potential lead. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann swiftly gained international media attention. What began as a missing child story quickly became a worldwide event. The media started to doubt the McCannans' involvement as the investigation was postponed, with some conjecturing that they might be concealing something. According to reports, a police dog picked up the smell of blood in the McCannans' rental car and apartment, which heightened suspicions that they might be behind Madeline's disappearance. A media frenzy ensued, with the world waiting for answers that never materialized, from what began as sympathy for the McCanns. On September 9, 2007, the McCannans left the UK, even though they were named as suspects in their daughter's disappearance case. Chief Inspector Tavares de Almeida came to the conclusion in a report on September 10, 2007, that Madeline had died inadvertently in the family's apartment, and that the McCannans had staged the kidnapping with the assistance of their friends. A leaked diplomatic cable from September 28, 2007, which showed that US and UK authorities were cooperating on the case, provided more evidence in support of this theory. Tensions with the McCanns grew when they declined to take part in a police reconstruction. Even though Portuguese police had broadened their investigation in October 2007, when the Portuguese Attorney General declared on July 21, 2008, that there was no evidence connecting the McCannans or Robert Murat to Madeline's disappearance, the investigation was declared closed. But only a few weeks later, on August 4, 2008, the authorities acknowledged the lack of conclusive evidence and made thousands of pages of case files public. Following Madeleine McCann's disappearance, her parents established the Madeleine's Fund, which by March 2008 had amassed over PS 1.8 million. With assistance from individuals such as J.K., the fund provided a PS 2.5 million reward for leads, including Rowling and Simon Cowell. Control Risks and Mateto 3, two private investigators the McCanns hired, may have produced some results in Morocco. In 2008, tensions grew between the McCannans and the Portuguese police. They hired Oakley International, which produced e-fits of a suspect, 4 PS 500,000. When Scotland Yard released these e-fits in 2013, they caused a stir because they had been kept secret until then. The Sunday Times later paid the McCannans PS 55,000 in damages for publishing the story. The McCanns met with British Home Secretary Alan Johnson in 2009 to ask that Madeleine's case be reviewed. Jim Gamble's 2010 report, which criticized the British and Portuguese authorities' lack of coordination and suggested closer cooperation, was the result of this. The British government began Operation Grange, a thorough investigation of the case by Scotland Yard, in May 2011 under Home Secretary Theresa May. A petition from the Sun newspaper served as one of the catalysts for this. By July 2013, the investigation had grown from a team of 29 detectives to a full-scale operation. Over the years, the team looked into hundreds of potential sightings and sex offenders, translated documents, and published age-progressed photos. The investigation's scope was reduced by 2016. But in 2018, the Home Secretary authorized more funding, raising the overall cost to PS 11.6 million. In order to continue the investigation, there were additional extensions in 2018 and 2019. Calls made close to the Ocean Club around the time Madeleine vanished were tracked by police in 2014 using mobile phone tracking. After being questioned, the former bus driver and his associates denied any involvement. Euclid Monteiro, a former employee of the Ocean Club whose phone was found close to the scene, was another important person. No evidence connected him to Madeleine's case, despite the fact that he had previously been questioned about break-ins and he passed away in 2009. During the same raid on Scotland Yard, believing Montero was responsible, issued a request for information in March 2014 regarding a man implicated in sexual assaults in vacation homes in the Algarve. Interviews with 4 Portuguese nationals produced no leads, and a thorough search in Praia da Luz in June 2014 produced no fresh evidence. 11 individuals, including Robert Murat's associates, were questioned later in December, but once more, no significant results were obtained. More than 8,600 sightings of Madeleine had been reported globally by 2016, but none of them were deemed credible. Scotland Yard kept investigating every lead, but she was nowhere to be found. Authorities were hopeful that the remaining pieces of the puzzle, including cell site data and leads about possible suspects, including local suspects offenders, would eventually come together as the investigation continued. 10 years after Madeleine vanished, in 2017, her parents continued to hold out hope. They felt that someone out there knew what had happened, so they vowed to keep looking for as long as it took. Meanwhile, authorities in Braunschweig, Germany, got a vital tip regarding Christian B., who allegedly admitted to a friend in 2017 that he was aware of Madeleine's fate. German police made a shocking announcement in June 2020. They had a new top suspect in Madeleine McCann's disappearance. Christian Bruckner, the suspect, was a 43-year-old convicted sexual offender with a history of unsettling offenses. This new lead gave the investigation new hope after years of dead ends. Bruckner had a troubling criminal history. He had a lengthy criminal history that included drug trafficking, sexual abuse, and burglaries during the previous 30 years. Authorities characterized him as an empathetic psychopath who preyed on defenseless girls. When Bruckner was found guilty of sexual abuse in Germany in 1994, his criminal career officially began. He carried on committing crimes after fleeing to Portugal, such as robbing hotels and vacation rentals close to the Praia da Luz resort. Bruckner's actions on the night of Madeleine's disappearance were connected by German police. 3 primary suspects, 2 men and a woman, who were spotted with a girl who looked like Madeleine, are the subject of the most recent development. Investigators found that Bruckner's cell phone had made a call close to the resort an hour prior to her disappearance. The day after Madeleine vanished, investigators discovered that Bruckner had left Portugal and registered his vehicle to someone else. Did he know more than he was revealing, or was this merely a coincidence? When investigators found troubling evidence connecting Bruckner to other crimes, it appeared that his involvement was even more likely. Bruckner was discovered to have posted about his fantasies of abusing children in a Skype pedophile chat room in 2013. It raised suspicions even though he didn't bring up Madeleine. Then, in 2016, investigators discovered images and videos of child abuse in an abandoned factory that had once belonged to Bruckner. Police took years to link Bruckner to Madeleine's case even though he was a known criminal, but when they looked further, they discovered that he had 68 videos and 391 pictures of child pornography. Christian Bruckner was given a 7-year prison sentence in December 2019 for the 2005 rape of a 72-year-old American woman in Portugal, close to Praia da Luz, where Madeleine McCann's family had been lodging. It is thought that Bruckner assaulted the woman, another woman, and a teenager during the assault, which was caught on camera. Portuguese authorities did not disclose the person's identity, but by 2022 they had named him an official suspect in Madeleine's case. Both German and British police had requested the announcement. Whether Bruckner was the suspect or if someone else had surfaced was unclear. Bruckner's criminal record also included drug trafficking sentences. The Barragem do Arade Reservoir, located approximately 30 miles from Praia da Luz, was searched for 3 days by Portuguese and German authorities in May 2023 after Madeleine vanished. In 2008, a lawyer said he had previously searched the area after receiving information from his criminal contacts that Madeleine's body might be there. Bruckner was also on trial in Germany for rape and sexual assault, with the attacks allegedly taking place in Portugal from 2002 to 2017. An email account connected to Madeleine's disappearance was discovered by authorities, according to a German investigator in June 2024. Bruckner was purportedly connected to the account. A second email account used to disseminate pictures of child abuse was also discovered by investigators. Remarkably, the emails associated with this account were erased soon after Madeleine vanished in early 2007. In a separate trial in October 2024, a German court cleared Christian Bruckner, although he has not been charged in Madeleine's case. Bruckner, 47, is currently serving a 7-year prison sentence in Germany for rape. According to the defense, there was not enough proof to find him guilty of the charges. Although no charges have been filed against him in relation to the case, Bruckner is still the main suspect in her disappearance, even though prosecutors had pushed for an additional 15-year sentence. Though they need more proof before they can charge him, German investigators continue to believe Christian Bruckner may have been involved in Madeleine McCann's disappearance. They cite his history of targeting young girls, cell phone records, and suspicious behavior as important connections to the case. "We will never give up hope of finding Madeleine alive," the McCanns wrote on their website, expressing their continued optimism. "But in order to find peace, we must know the truth regardless of the result." The investigation goes on while Bruckner remains silent in prison. Is there more to the story? Or is he the one at fault? We live with this doubt in our hearts, even though we don't know what happened. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. On Madison Street in New York, Officer Freeman saw a man throwing big black garbage bags into the river's edge early on April 7, 1996. The man froze as Freeman came closer. The officer noticed the 2 cars next to the man, their trunks stuffed with trash bags. He searched and found something startling. Bloody tools and blood-soaked clothing were found in the bags, along with a dismembered body that had been cut into 66 pieces in the most gory way imaginable. The man who disposed of the bags introduced himself as Vladimir Zelinin, 48. The police quickly learned that the person inside the bags was Yakov Gluzman, a 48-year-old billionaire and well-known cancer researcher who had tragically been duped by Vladimir. When Vladimir brought up Yakov's wife, Rita Gluzman, the case took an unexpected turn. The crucial query was, what role did Rita play in this terrible incident? Was she planning to murder her husband, or was Vladimir just assigning blame to deflect criticism and avoid responsibility? We must go back in time and meet Yakov Gluzman, the man at the heart of this whole situation, in order to fully comprehend it. What part did he play in this terrible incident, and who was he? January 2, 1948, was Yakov Gluzman's birthday. He was an internationally renowned scientist who made significant contributions to the study of cancer. Since their early years in Ukraine, which was then a part of the Soviet Union, Yakov and his wife Rita had known one another. 1948 saw the birth of Rita Gluzman in Ternopil, Ukraine. She was the oldest child of Holocaust survivors, Paula and Lab Shapiro. As a child, Rita saw friends and family members killed by the Nazis, which gave her a distinct viewpoint. Nevertheless, Yakov was unable to obtain a visa to depart the Soviet Union due to his importance as a researcher. He was regarded as an emerging, talented scientist. In February 1970, Rita found out she was expecting their son after departing for Israel. To facilitate their emigration, Yakov took a menial job as a carpenter, sacrificing his academic career in the Soviet Union. Rita persuaded the UN to bring her and Yakov back together in America with the aid of Jewish organizations. She even put pressure on the United States by going on an 18-day hunger strike close to the UN Senate to assist in her reunion with Yakov. Rita's will to go on a hunger strike was obvious. She was a very motivated individual. She desired to succeed in her life. Yakov was allowed to join her in the West by the Soviet Union as a result of her efforts. Yakov was able to carry on with his scientific work after the couple eventually got back together in the United States in 1972. They made Long Island, New York their permanent home in 1977, 5 years later. Yakov founded the pharmaceutical business Harbor Laboratory in New York by 1987. With Yakov's assistance, Rita also founded her technology business, ECI Technologies, at the same time. In 1987, Yakov advanced to the position of Director of Molecular Biology at Rockland County's Letterly Laboratories. Yakov worked in Rockland, so Rita had to make the difficult choice to move to Long Island, while managing ECI Technologies. As the family's fortunes improved, they eventually moved into a large home in the posh neighborhood of Upper Saddle River, New Jersey, which is a very pleasant upper-middle-class neighborhood. The homes in this lovely neighborhood are very comfortable and sit on 3/4 to an acre of land. Vladimir's claims don't add up. If Rita and Yakov had a happy marriage, is he making this whole thing up to cover up a darker agenda, such as eradicating Yakov for financial gain? Let's go back in time to the discovery of Yakov's body before drawing any conclusions. Officer Freeman made a strange discovery in a parking lot near the river's edge on Easter, April 7, 1996. 2 cars with open trunks were the first thing he noticed. He also saw Vladimir Zelinin, who had one glove on his right hand and was dressed in a t-shirt. Large black trash bags were being thrown into the river by Zelinin. Freeman cautiously approached and saw that Zelinin's shoes and pants were splattered with blood, and that a surgical glove was also covered in blood. The air was heavy with the stench of drying blood. As Freeman continued his investigation, he discovered 2 bags, one containing blood-soaked clothing and the other containing bloody tools, including a hacksaw, axes, knives, and a scalpel. Unbelievably, 8 additional bags containing Jakob Glusman's tragically dismembered remains were found in the trunks of the 2 cars. His nose and lips were even removed, as part of the horrific act of chopping his body into 66 pieces. Vladimir Zelinin, wearing blood-stained trousers, stood beside Officer Freeman. Zelinin, who was Russian, could hardly speak English. He shockingly disclosed that Vladimir's cousin, Rita Glusman, had been instrumental in his immigration to the United States just 11 months earlier. As Vladimir admitted that Rita was the one who coerced him into carrying out the unimaginable deed of killing Yakov, the terrifying realization came to light. Rita had already left with her passport when Bergen County authorities showed up at her house the next day. Prosecutors were concerned that she may have escaped abroad, but Rita was allegedly on her way to Long Island while Zelinin was being held in Bergen County. It was clear that she knew the police would be looking for her. She made a quick stop in Nyack along the way, stealing a set of New York license plates from a parked car to hide her car's New Jersey tags. There was little question that Rita had planned the murder and was now evading the authorities, despite the fact that investigators in both jurisdictions had not formally named her as a suspect in her husband's death. They made it clear in a public alert that they wanted to talk to her. After her husband passed away, Rita disappeared for 6 days. On April 12, 1996, the police finally located her in Cold Spring Harbor, Long Island. Rita was caught breaking into a guest cabin by a cleaning lady during a routine cleaning round at the Hawk's Nest cabin. Her husband had worked for a company that owned this cabin. The woman had quickly called the police because she thought Rita was a thief. Rita attempted to flee by scurrying out a rear window onto the lab grounds after being confronted. She was eventually located and taken into custody by the local police. Notably, authorities discovered a variety of travel brochures, including some from Switzerland and Australia, inside her car, which also had a stolen license plate. When Rita Glusman was arrested, the police were taken aback to see her. She was no longer the woman who wore expensive clothing. Her clothes, makeup, hair color, and even airline information had all changed. The police became increasingly suspicious because she had completely changed her appearance. However, there was one issue that prevented the police from charging her with her husband's murder under New York law. When flaws started to show in their marriage's apparently flawless exterior, the investigation took a different turn. The couple's hidden tensions surfaced during their move from Long Island to New Jersey. It turned out that moving to New Jersey, even though it was a mutual decision, put Rita under financial strain, particularly for her business, ECI Technologies. Yakov's income was crucial to the company's survival because it was not doing as well as it once did. However, there was one contradiction. Despite Rita's claims that the move left them impoverished, she was spotted driving a BMW, wearing mink coats and leading a fairly opulent lifestyle. On the other hand, Yakov used to wear regular jeans and drive a 1983 Nissan. According to his friends, he was more of an ordinary guy who wore khakis everywhere he went. The American dream appealed to Rita. She desired high living and spas. Yakov Glusman left the home in New Jersey in the summer of 1995 and rented a second-floor apartment in Pearl River, just a few blocks from his place of employment. Yaakov had begun dating a woman he had met in 1994 while traveling to Israel to visit his family. By September of that year, the rift between Rita and Yaakov had become irreversible. While Rita's technology company was in danger of going bankrupt, Yaakov was making progress in his career as a cancer researcher. In a phone call with his father in the fall of 1994, Yaakov acknowledged that his marriage to Rita, which had lasted 25 years, was failing. Yaakov Glusman filed for divorce. The ECI Technologies company became a focal point during their divorce proceedings. Yaakov insisted on thoroughly examining the company's finances before accepting any terms, while Rita desired sole ownership. Rita was devastated to hear this. Yaakov claimed marital cruelty as the cause of the divorce when he filed for it. Tragic events occurred 4 months later, in 1996, when the couple's already shaky relationship was further strained when their 25-year-old son died while serving in the Israeli army. Yaakov wanted to leave Rita because she was so furious. How could he have the audacity to abandon her, who was so invested in his transformation in the United States? Rita noticed that she was becoming desperate, and some people noticed that her behavior was becoming unpredictable. She found it difficult to control her cravings for luxury, even after Yaakov gave her $90,000 when he moved out a year earlier in 1995. She was suddenly in America, where she could eat as much as she pleased. For her, it represented success. Rita Glusman engaged a private investigator to look for any negative information about Yaakov in an effort to stop the divorce. She went to unlawful measures such as wiretapping Yaakov's phone and even threatening to spread the AIDS virus to his girlfriend. She wanted to discredit this woman in Israel by putting cocaine on her, among other things. She had attempted to hire a lot of people. Her husband was being followed by others. She had extortion attempts against her husband's family. Rita Glusman started planning his murder after these plans failed to stop the divorce. She experienced yet another setback when she was arrested on shoplifting charges after being caught stealing small items from a New Jersey pharmacy. Her business kept failing, and as accusations were made by both parties, the divorce process grew more acrimonious. Rita was prepared to involve her cousin Zelinin and had already made a firm decision. Despite being straightforward, her plan was extremely cruel. Rita got a key to her ex-husband's apartment in the months before Easter. During one of their arguments, she persuaded him to give it to her and had a copy made. She was aware of her ex-husband's routine, which included him spending Saturday nights at the lab and typically coming home at 11:30 p.m. Knowing this, Rita made sure they had everything they would require, including a knife, a scalpel, a hacksaw, and a variety of cleaning supplies. Rita and Zelinin drove from Bergen County in a late-model Ford Taurus registered to her company on the evening of April 6, 1996, just hours before Yaakov was scheduled to return home. They parked near Yaakov's apartment in a poorly lit spot and waited in silence in the living room. It was 11:30 p.m. when Yaakov parked his Nissan Maxima and went inside his apartment. At that moment, Zelinin struck first with an axe. When Yaakov entered his apartment with an axe and a hatchet, she and Vladimir were waiting for him and jumped on him, attacking him. Rita Glusman then approached and started striking her husband with the axe, according to Zelinin. It was then that Zelinin's hand was injured. He was unable to see exactly where he struck Yaakov because of the darkness, but the scientist fell to the ground. Rita then attacked her husband with ferocity and violent force. Her axe once slipped and struck Zelinin's right hand, causing it to bleed continuously. Rita insisted that they would examine Zelinin's wound later because they were pressed for time. She took a knife out of the bag and stabbed her ex-husband in the chest to make sure he was dead. His bloody body was dragged into the bathroom, where it was dismembered. Rita was adamant that no part of the man was big enough to be recognized. To make it impossible for anyone who might find the body to identify him, they even cut off his nose and lips, in addition to cutting off his fingertips to prevent fingerprint identification. Rita went into a cleaning frenzy, trying to get rid of any sign of the crime while Zelinin kept butchering the body. Around 3 in the morning, Kathy Armstrong, a neighbor who lived 1 floor below Yaakov, was the only one who heard a thumping and banging sound. April 7, 1996. She was unaware that the remains of Yaakov were being disposed of, his bloody clothes and body parts packed into 9 plastic garbage bags. Another bag was filled with the equipment needed for the gory task. After that, The bags were placed in the two cars' trunks. After returning to East Rutherford, Zelenine would dispose of Gluzman's remains in the Passaic River and then, before dawn, dispose of the car. But there was a hitch. They were not on time. Zelenine unintentionally set off the car's theft alarm while loading it. If anyone in the apartment complex heard the alarm, they didn't bother to look into it because it was only a short cry in the night. Rita, however, became frightened, leapt into the Taurus and told Zelenine to run. After circling the neighborhood for a while, they cautiously made their way back to the apartment complex, checked to make sure everything was okay, and went back to their solemn task. And it took longer than Rita had expected to dismember Jakob and clean his apartment. The necessity to treat Zelenin's hand wound, which resulted from Rita's violent behavior against her husband, further threw off this schedule. Zelenine and Rita stopped at a CVS pharmacy in the town of Fairlawn on their way south. It was captured on a security camera that Rita spent $32 on bandages. What at first glance seemed to be a simple murder case turned out to be anything but. After investigators inspected the crime scene at Jakob's Pearl River apartment, the strange traces of forensic evidence that the investigators found had not yet been tested. Even after testing, there was still uncertainty, because there was no assurance that Rita would be directly implicated in the crime. The police knew that even if they were able to locate Rita's stray fingerprint, a competent defense lawyer could have it rejected by linking it to one of the couple's sporadic arguments. At this point, Zelenin's confession was the only solid evidence the police had. This presented a problem, though, because according to New York state law, an accomplice's testimony could not be used as the basis for a murder case unless it was backed up by other witnesses or strong evidence, neither of which was present at the time. Michael Rosen, Rita's lawyer, attempted to obtain bail the day after her arrest, pointing to the peculiar circumstances of the case. Rosen filed a felony examination after the judge denied bail despite the possibility of murder charges. For Rita to be detained without bail, prosecutors had 48 hours to demonstrate that she was dangerous and that there was a chance she would run away again. Since the police couldn't produce enough proof, Rosen was successful and Rita was taken to jail after posting a $250,000 bond. However, everything changed when an FBI agent called. Unexpectedly, Rosen was ordered to bring Rita to the United States, White Plains Federal Court Building. Rosen found this surprising and didn't understand why the federal government was becoming involved. The reason became evident as Rosen and Rita arrived. Local authorities had worked with federal prosecutors to devise a novel strategy to charge Rita for her role in her husband's death, while Michael Rosen had been preoccupied with getting her bail. Federal prosecutors invoked the Violence Against Women Act, a 1994 domestic violence statute, in a brief 4-page complaint. It was a daring step. This law permitted federal intervention in cases of domestic violence committed by someone who crosses state lines, a tactic that had never before been employed against a woman. But it gave the police the power they needed to bring Rita to justice. It was noteworthy because it gave them permission to use Zelenin's testimony. In court, Zelinin described the events leading up to the incident and how they dismembered Yakov. Vladimir Zelinin claimed that Rita Gluzman was behind a wall a few feet away and that he was concealed behind the door as it opened. Zelinin struck Yakov's head with an axe for the first time as soon as he entered the room. With a knife in hand, Rita hacked and stabbed Mr. Gluzman until she nearly cut Zelenin's fingers off his right hand. According to Zelinin, he began by chopping off the arm at the shoulder, followed by the left leg below the knee and the right leg below the knee. Then, he claimed, he severed his head. Witness reports from Yakov's neighbors who saw a couple packing bags into a car at 3 in the morning were among the other pieces of evidence the police brought in. April 7, 1996, Rita was recognized by a pharmacy employee as the agitated woman buying bandages and antiseptic at 4 in the morning. The same morning. In addition, Rita's controlling personality was acknowledged by a private investigator she hired to spy on her husband and his lover. More than a year and a half after Yakov's passing, on April 3, 1997, Rita faced the U.S. Judge Barrington Parker, District Court. Despite her denials, the jury found her guilty of killing Yakov, dismembering him and dumping him in the river after being persuaded by Zelenin's testimony. She was given a life sentence in prison by the judge. In the Soviet Union, the woman who had once been celebrated as a symbol of freedom for a whole class was now imprisoned. Vladimir Zelenin was later given a 22.5-year prison sentence in May 1997. Rita Glusman was released from prison on compassionate grounds in 2020 because of her deteriorating health, which included early Parkinson's disease and multiple strokes. Although Yakov's brother wrote a letter opposing Rita's release, expressing horror and fear, the judge took into consideration Rita's request for a second chance to avoid dying in prison. Rita went back home after the judge allowed her release despite reservations. Due to a broken marriage, Yakov Glusman's life took a terrible turn. The unfortunate thing is that rather than finding a peaceful solution, his wife, once regarded as a symbol of freedom, caused their relationship to devolve into a nightmare. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, today we're diving into another truly horrifying case. If you want to support my channel, make sure to subscribe and stay active. It really helps me out. I'd be super grateful for that. Let's get started. The second biggest city in Washington, Spokane, is the setting for this tale. The city may be just as dangerous for its citizens as it is for visitors, despite its seeming beauty and allure. Spokane County has the highest crime rate in Washington, at double the state average, according to the state. Thus, today's Cinderella story has a bitter taste within and a lovely appearance. The Holdens were a normal American family who had long resided in Spokane. The house was constantly crowded with youngsters because they loved them. Joshua, an adoptive son, and two girls were the children of Judy and John Holden. The grown daughters had long since moved out and lived independently, but Joshua, their only son, stayed with his parents, big, sad, and always frowning. The young man regretfully stayed at his parents' house because he was unable to start his own family. The Holden family was forced to take more than one, if not two, children from the orphanage because they wanted a steady income in the form of substantial benefits. So one day, Courtney, a charming young child, entered the Holden household. Born on February 28, 1992, Courtney Corrine Holden ended up in an orphanage 2 years later. Youngsters of all ages fervently pleaded to God for a mother and father, and one happy day, the girl's wish was granted. Courtney, who was young, traveled to Spokane. When the doors shut behind her, Courtney moved in with Joshua and a number of other foster kids. The girl's hopes of having a loving and supportive family were merely hopes. Courtney's existence at the Holdens was even more depressing than it had been in the orphanage. It became a true nightmare. She was made to perform a variety of household tasks from an early age. After every dinner, she had to wash the dishes for the entire family and clean the entire house. The Holdens' much better treatment of the other foster children was particularly startling, and nobody could comprehend why they detested this lovely girl. Courtney was the final child they had acquired from the orphanage, and Judy Holden was by that time of a respectable age. Maybe it was why they were so inexplicably angry. Even going outside without permission was prohibited for Courtney. Visitors to their house frequently overheard Judy and Joshua abusing Courtney, referring to her as Cinderella, as though she were a fictional heroine who was actually a prisoner to her evil sisters and stepmother. Courtney was in a similar situation. The girl, however, proved to be quite receptive and grew accustomed to the terrible circumstances after years of living with the Holdens. She lacked a cell phone and other contemporary amenities, was terrified of her foster mother, and was terrified of her brother Joshua just by being around him. He also prohibited her from interacting with her peers. She never left home without permission or necessity. The only way she could get any fresh air was to go outside into the backyard and socialize with the neighbors while the home was deserted. This is exactly the kind of setting in which Courtney was raised. She simply adapted to her life as she grew older. Because she had no idea of a normal home and no other life, she never became resentful and always treated her foster parents with respect. When Joshua moved home with his sister for a considerable period of time because of his parents' irreparable differences, Courtney felt a certain measure of independence. It was the happiest time of Courtney's life. Her long-awaited taste of independence arrived when she was allowed to leave the house, go for walks, and interact with her peers. After a while, Courtney graduated from high school and had her first love. Michael proved to be a worthy companion, and she felt cared for and attended to by a man she had never experienced before. Courtney was constantly ecstatic after every meeting. When they had a son in 2011, their relationship came to an end. In desperation, Michael pleaded with his lover to come live with him and be a part of the family. However, for some reason, the young mother refused to move and kept living in the house with Holden, ending all romantic ties with Michael. The Holden house was deserted by that point. The foster kids had moved out and grown up. Since John Holden, Courtney's foster father, had died, she spent a considerable amount of time living only with her foster mother, Judy Michael, and was only permitted to see his son when Courtney's brother Joshua was away. With Judy's consent, they had a quiet existence with their kid, until Joshua came back after his father passed away in 2014 and started to exert strict control over the family home. In northeast Spokane, on Hero Avenue, a block from Rogers Middle School, he set up several security cameras around their house. The yard was littered with posters that said, "Smile, you're being videotaped," and there were multiple cameras pointing in various directions. Courtney became nervous once more when she saw the security cameras, since she knew that walking outdoors could result in her being reprimanded by Joshua for escaping. Once more, Courtney's life became intolerable. Courtney admitted to a neighbor in 2015 that she was once more prohibited from owning a cell phone, maintaining social media profiles, interacting with people outside of the family drive, and even leaving the house without Joshua's consent. Joshua Holden was so upset about Courtney's son's birth that he had her stop communicating with Michael altogether. Courtney obeyed in silence. When neighbors inquired about the cause of the bruises on Courtney's arms and face, she candidly acknowledged, "Joshua beats me." Concerned neighbors attempted to assist Courtney in any way they could, wondering why she put up with such cruelty. Since the victim never publicly acknowledged that she was being controlled by her brother, the Holdens were able to keep the matter quiet each time they called the police to call attention to Courtney's anguish, since she was not permitted to leave the house during the day. Courtney was eventually deprived of the opportunity to socialize with her neighbors, who have since only seen her outside in the evenings. Once more, Courtney complied in silence. Joshua was a tall, fat man that no one knew, unlike Courtney. He was incredibly strong and never held back while insulting others. According to his pals, Joshua was an aggressive, erratic man with paranoid tendencies. He once boasted in public that he could quickly end a life and dispose of a body with ease. His criminal past was noteworthy. He was accused of assault and harassment in 2005, but he was freed because there was insufficient evidence and the victim refused to assist the authorities. He was also suspected of misbehavior and attacking a woman in 2003, but in 2006 the culprit was unidentified. Joshua was taken into custody for both burglary and abusing his mother. He was compelled to leave his parents' house for a number of years as a result of these experiences. Joshua grew even more irate after his return. In an attempt to exert total control, he put cameras both inside and outside the house. Courtney, the young mother, nearly ceased interacting with friends, claiming she was scared to go anywhere for fear that Joshua would learn and things would worsen. Until Joshua discovered that Courtney had a Facebook account, one person spoke with her every day. "I must go. I must go. Josh is on his way." Nearly 2 years have passed since her previous message. Her account was then disabled indefinitely. According to acquaintances, the Holden family's dynamics are strange. In August 2018, following another argument, Courtney hurriedly packed her belongings into a suitcase and ran outside. An enraged Judy yelled after her, "Come home!" To which Courtney responded, "I'm not staying here anymore." Those familiar with the family have been baffled as to why Courtney's son calls Judy Mom, and Joshua is called only by his first name, while his biological mother is referred to as Dad. Some have even speculated that Joshua may be the boy's father. Shortly after, a furious Joshua, who was more than 6 feet tall and weighed 300 pounds, dragged Courtney back inside the house. Judy slammed the door. The neighbor said she couldn't help herself. Courtney was a young woman who had led an invisible existence, and that was the last time this neighbor, and perhaps the rest of the family, saw her. She remained. Before neighbors and acquaintances started to worry about her disappearance, it had been almost 2 years. Michael and his current girlfriend voiced concerns regarding Courtney Holden's location in October 2019, 1.5 years after she vanished. After nearly 2 years of not seeing Courtney, the father, who is Courtney's son's father, filed a missing persons complaint with the police on October 24 because he was desperate to see his son. When police arrived at the Holdens' house with a search warrant in hand, they were shocked to discover that Courtney was indeed not there. Judy and Joshua had no desire to assist the authorities. After letting the investigators inspect Courtney's room, Courtney's stepmother ordered them to leave the house right away. They even brought in search dogs, but to no effect. According to the Holdens, Courtney fled after leaving her son behind. They couldn't say who was utilizing electronic food stamps or who might have kept cashing Social Security funds into her account. But Judy and Joshua took the remaining $600, 0 cents, out of Courtney's bank account when the Holdens' house was searched that same day. Interestingly, an unnamed lady calling the National Crime Information Center of America the following day claimed to be Courtney, saying she was safe and didn't want to be located. The woman was identified by police as one of Courtney's half-sisters after they tracked down the call. Joshua and Judy thereafter shared a variety of contradictory accounts regarding Courtney's disappearance. In one account, they stated she had fled with a truck driver, but in another, they alleged she was hiding a boyfriend from everyone. The Holdens were suspicious because of Courtney's disappearance and the inconsistent statements of her roommates, who obviously had something to conceal. In late October 2019, Joshua and Judy Holden fled Spokane in a hurry, which only led investigators to believe they were responsible for Courtney's abduction. Judy's adopted daughter's house in Texas is where the Holdens were located. They were arrested and placed in a Texas jail in early October after authorities were able to charge them with identity theft and cashing benefits meant for Courtney. The investigation into Courtney's whereabouts by the Spokane Police Department swiftly devolved into a missing persons case, which was then handed over to Major Crimes Detective Randy Lesser. After the search warrants he filed in Spokane County Superior Court were made public, Lesser provided an update on the investigation. Court documents and police interviews serve as the foundation for this story of Courtney's disappearance and the investigation. Officially, Courtney was listed as missing. All states received alerts, and the case was covered by a number of news outlets. When patrol officers and detectives visited the house for different reasons, an aggressive search was initiated. Judy and Joshua Holden declined to assist with the inquiry. Unusual actions in cases of missing persons and welfare inspections. A lady who identified herself contacted Crime Check on the day Courtney was reported missing and said she was fine. The police dispatcher also spoke with the woman who was pretending to be Courtney. As it turned out, it was Courtney's sister who refused to explain to Lester why she was pretending to be her, most likely in an effort to dispel Judy's suspicions and put an end to the hunt. The possibility that she is deceased disturbs me. In an interview, Lester stated that he was especially worried about Joshua's history. Joshua had previously faced assault charges, but the case was dismissed just before the trial because the victims refused to cooperate with the prosecution. In addition to court documents indicating that Holden was a suspect in another assault in 2003, investigators were now gathering DNA evidence. Joshua was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and was reported by family members and neighbors as angry and erratic. According to the neighbors, Judy was terrified of Joshua because he was unemployed. Joshua had also been found guilty of burglary and arrested on counts of unlawful imprisonment. According to family members, Joshua and Judy boasted to them about their knowledge of how to evade authorities, and Joshua discussed how simple it would be to kill someone and conceal their body. Individuals don't simply vanish, particularly if they have a son. According to court documents with fewer notations, Courtney was a devoted mother who would never leave her son alone for a year and a half. After telling neighbors and family that she was traveling with her lover, an unidentified truck driver whom no one knew, Courtney was not spotted outside her house with Joshua and Judy. Rumors occasionally circulated that she and her fiancé had eloped. She was allegedly only at the residence at other times and wasn't available for visits. When Lesser arrived on their house in early October, Judy informed him that Courtney had only been home for a few days. She claims that Courtney and her son walked away. Judy shut the door in Lesser's face when he requested for her phone number, according to court filings. Then, grudgingly, she allowed policemen to enter Courtney's room to inspect it. She was somewhat anxious. According to Lesser, the property was incredibly disorganized, with heaps of possessions occupying every accessible area. In court filings, Lesser noted that the mattress was exposed and that Courtney's room was similarly disorganized. There seemed to be no one living there. Lesser observed that Judy became frightened and lost sight of one of the investigators behind the closed door at one point. When Lester instructed the detectives to look around the remainder of the house for Courtney's son, she told them to get out. Lesser was informed later that day by neighbors that they seen Joshua, Judy, and one of Courtney's sisters departing with the boy in a van. Additionally, Detective Lesser thought it was unusual that Courtney, who had a chronic illness, hadn't seen a doctor since October 2017. Despite the gaps in her medical records, she had been taking medication every month before going missing, and her final prescription was written in July 2018. Courtney's card was used for groceries, and monthly withdrawals from her bank account persisted. The fact that Joshua and Judy were shopping with the youngster was verified by surveillance footage. On the day that Courtney was reported missing in early October, the cameras also saw the pair taking the last of the money out of her bank account. Joshua and Judy had departed their house by October 24. According to Lesser, when police arrived to carry out a search warrant, the family's 6 pets were gone and the DVR from the home security system had been taken out. In mid-November, Joshua and Judy's cell phone numbers were canceled, but on the same day, 2 new numbers with Texas area codes were activated. A neighbor reported activities at the house to the police around a month after the Holdens had left. Judy's husband and one of her daughters had traveled down from Texas to see how things were doing at the house. Judy had retired, they said, and they hadn't seen Courtney in 2 years. Judy's daughter claimed the boy was Courtney's son, despite the man telling authorities that Joshua and Judy had a child together. Lesser went to Texas in the middle of December to look for Judy and Joshua. They were discovered by police at the residence of Judy's daughter and Courtney's son, Joshua. Judy Holden was arrested on suspicion of exploiting Courtney's bank accounts, hiding her son, interfering with custody, and identity theft. The boy was successfully restored to his father after being discovered safe and sound. Other members of the family were not charged. Police used search dogs to look through Judy's Spokane house, but they were unable to locate Courtney. Additionally, a search of a Texas residence turned up no information on Courtney's location. Judy's vehicle and trailer, which were parked in an Oklahoma RV facility, were also searched by officers. Judy, 74, and Joshua, 40, refused to be interrogated by authorities while they were detained in Texas. Police were waiting for the governor to issue a warrant for their return, since they refused to be extradited to Spokane. They were probably released as authorities were unable to establish their involvement in Courtney's disappearance. In addition to the months-long investigation, this is perhaps one of the most comprehensive missing person investigations. I have a variety of information in 4 notebooks. Police think Courtney is probably dead, and Judy and Joshua continued to deny any involvement in her disappearance, but regrettably there is no method to demonstrate it. However, Judy and Joshua have not been charged with anything, in spite of the aforementioned accusations. The belief that they knew what happened to Courtney is still prevalent. Joshua has a reputation for being violent, but he has also claimed that he could kill someone and successfully conceal the body from the authorities. Although they have not yet made any arrests in connection with Courtney's case, they believe she is dead. In summary, Courtney was unfortunate enough to be a member of the Holden family, and this little girl who yearned for love and family lacked the bravery to defend herself. She genuinely thought that these individuals who had screamed at her, humiliated her, and made her labor for them were her family. However, is it really important to protect oneself against one's own relatives? Since Courtney was never seen again after that fateful evening when he forcibly took her into the house, it is extremely regrettable that Joshua Holden's audacious public statements about taking his own life and concealing his body cannot be used as evidence of his involvement in her disappearance. No one knows what she endured during those horrific moments, or the atrocities these monsters who claim to be family were committing behind closed doors. There are innumerable ways to covertly dispose of a body, with different substances that are undetectable to police dogs or professionals. This shows that even although Courtney suffered that night, her soul is still at Holden Manor, where she sought out family but ultimately met her demise. Her boy was removed from the Holden household and given to his father, who still looks after him now. In action, Courtney Holden is still missing. please get in touch with the Spokane Police Department if you have any information that could help with the investigation. Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon.